Predictable world events. Now, we've been discussing on this show a lot about prophecy. I guess you could call me more of a naturalist in many ways. At the same time, there are some interesting things that this guest is going to bring. Keith Hunter, he's going to take us into a lot of interesting astrological things. Astrological. There are some celestial bodies he believes when they are lined up at certain times in history, people in this world act certain ways. It's really weird. He goes into the Bible showing numbers and how they are significant to these astrological signs. He does a little mythology, but he'll take you through this PowerPoint presentation. I hope you enjoy. I hope you like it. And stay to the end because we have a real heartful discussion at the end and it gets pretty deep. Let us know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like and comment down below. And if this is your cup of tea, you know I'm always going to bring something else. Love you guys. We are Myth Vision. Welcome back, everybody. Your host, Derek Lambert. I have a special guest, a new treat, somebody you've never met before. And if you have, hey, my hat is off to you. It is Keith Hunter, I believe, correct?
Yes.
Yes, sir. If you don't mind, Keith, you wrote me an awesome email where I'm into stuff like this. I love researching ideas. I'm a fan of catastrophist concepts. Randall Carlson, you've got the Graham Hancocks and gentlemen like that who are trying to kind of figure it out. And Robert Schoch and these catastrophists were like, trying to explain what happened to the Ice Age. And you said something that was esoteric as well as a catastrophist concept, which I said, we got to do a show. If you don't mind introducing who you are, because I don't even know really who you are.
Yeah, I don't really publicize myself too much. I must admit, I only occasionally go on various programs. I should do more, but I tend to just do a lot of research privately, and it's so niche that not many people seem to. They either get it or they don't, because what I try to provide with my research is highly advanced esoteric solutions in certain critical areas. So my work over the past 20 years or so has been looking at various different things. I have looked at, from the basis of astronomy, I was very interested in this idea the Earth once had 360 days per year and the solar system was in a state of great harmony. And so I looked into that, and I basically did a breakthrough in certain mathematical physical laws which allowed you to confirm that the Earth did indeed once have 360 days per year and the Moon had 30 days a month, and it's all in line with, say, the ancient Egyptian calendar system, right? So that view of the ancients was correct. And I also looked at megalithic structures like the Great Pyramid and Stonehenge, and I was interested in the whole idea of an Earth grid system, that there was something special about the global location of these structures. And so I looked into that. And again, I used a true Earth ellipsoid model and was able to find certain brilliantly accurate mathematical connections with regards to the placement of the Great Pyramid and Stonehenge and even the pyramids on Mars. And this was an advance on a lot of other people, because most people out there, they just use degrees, minutes, and seconds as angular measures over a spheroid Earth. I'm using a true Earth ellipsoid model, so that was an advancement there. And I also looked at certain military bases, and they seem to be located at certain locations which are just like, with the same considerations as the megalithic structures. And so that actually comprises, that took me a long time to read upon and make the breakthroughs, and that's all in my book, Occult Physics. And this is split up into two parts, and the first one deals with the astronomical alignments and so forth, and some of the laws of proportion and how the Earth form was actually altered. But I also, in the second part of the book, start to look into some of the advanced stuff to do with the placement of megalithic monuments, like the Great Pyramid being at the corner point of a cube within the Earth, and the grid matrix that is actually connecting up all the lines, the great circle arcs to it, and certain critical ratios of certain components. And it's very high level stuff, because not only that, I show the same kind of diagrams relate to some of these sophisticated facilities like Menwith Hill and Pine Gap, these US bases, the only NSA stuff. So there's a real revival, okay, of occult technology, if you will. They are looking at reviving the technology that was the basis of some of these strange megalithic monuments, and even tie it into nuclear bombs, which appear to be activated with regard to where the sun is in the sky. You know, I did a major presentation on my YouTube channel talking about that thing. So that's the kind of stuff I've looked into in the early part as well. But I've always been interested in astronomy, and I've always been interested in the Bible as well, and the Mayan calendar. I was one of these guys that was obsessed about the whole 2012 thing, you know.
I get it. I get it. And I don't blame you. And by the way, our audience, the YouTube channel will be down in the description. If you guys are interested in, your interest is piqued here, make sure you go over there and check him out, subscribe to his channel. And I also have the Amazon affiliate link that I have down below. Is it on Amazon, your book?
No, I just sell it direct via my website. I don't have a deal with Amazon.
Okay, so just go to the website, then we'll put that down there too. So awesome.
But I was, as I said, I was really interested in the whole 2012 thing, and I bought lots of books on it. I mean, for example, there's John Major Jenkins 2012. You know, he thought it was all going to end there. There's here we go, another one. 2012, at the end of the world, that one there. And there was also, but one of the first books I bought actually was this one here. And I always like this book here. Most of the stuff in this book, in terms of what it says about the mathematics of the Mayan calendar, unfortunately is completely wrong. But what he does, he cites certain critical passages from some of the scholars who went to visit. You know, when we went to the New World initially in the 16th century, just into that decade, and they asked, before we'd totally burned everybody's books, you know, or destroyed the Aztecs culture and the Mayan culture, some of it was written down, and we got the mechanics of the calendar systems. And so I must admit, for 20 years, I had nothing. I was still thinking this calendar was tied into 2012, and in no way was it. But I made an absolute critical breakthrough and solved the entire calendar system. There is a special conjunction pattern, which I'm going to mention as part of this presentation, which is what the long count was designed to target, along with the calendar round, the Aztec system. They were both used in conjunction. And you will find also that even in the Bible and in Greek mythology, they all seem to have created various mythological stories with their own local gods and heroes, their own pantheons, but they were all pointing to the same conjunction patterns. So, for example, the destruction of the army of Sennacherib in the Bible, which is mentioned in the book of Uzziah, that particular story is encoded in Greek mythology as the death of Phaethon with the thunderbolt from Zeus. Okay. And so what I'm going to show you is, it's a bit technical, but I've got a very, very well laid out slideshow presentation. I have several, in fact.
That's good.
One was the mega one that was 4 hours long, but this one here is a kind of combination looking at some of the key dates of disaster. I mean, I'm going to solve a great mystery for people who are wondering about the day of the Exodus, for example. And this is where you've really got to think about what kind of research focus you need. A lot of people are trying to solve Exodus. Some people think, obviously, it's complete myth and never happened, which is not true. It did happen. It was a real disaster. All these so-called plagues, dust covering the land, obscuring the sun, the Nile going red, locusts and all that. There were real plagues and lots of people died. It was a real event. But then everybody's trying to figure it out. And this is where you've got to think, what is going to lead you to the decisive breakthrough? A lot of people are going into archaeology. That will get you so far. But these great disasters we have are triggered abruptly, suddenly, when very special alignments are achieved. And because of this, if you can figure out the alignments, you can work out the precise date of these disasters. And this is what I managed to do. I figured out the precise date of Noah's flood, of the Exodus alignment, of Crucifixion Day, And so there's a few people out there have already got Crucifixion Day correct. It's just that they don't know why it's correct, if you know what I'm saying. There's people not seeing some of the connections. And I've got some of these disaster dates. But once I figured what these precise dates were based on the alignments, I then realized how they were tied together by calendar cycles, like the Mayan long count system, 144,000 days and whatever, and 360-day cycles. And sometimes it's slight adjustments, because you're trying to harmonize two disasters. You've got one disaster here, you might have another disaster occurs 1,000 or so years in advance, separating them. And you might have a 360-day calendar. It might not harmonize perfectly, so you might have to have a little special adjustment of a certain number of days, and then you set in motion the calendar, and you're achieving harmonization with a certain special numbers of cycles completed. And this is the kind of information which is encoded in the Bible, in the parables of Jesus. What Jesus does, the stories of the main Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they are effectively, it's a fictional public life story of Jesus, which encodes calendar cycles which target future disaster alignments. Not just the Crucifixion Day, which was itself an end-of-age alignment, but also at least 3 alignments in the 6th century AD, which is what caused the Dark Ages to begin, and a few other alignments several centuries in advance of that. So Jesus actually basically targets multiple alignments, So a lot of people think that, like with Revelation, they think, there's this one great event going to happen. What they don't realize is we have these end-of-age alignments, if you will. We have one on average every several hundred years, not thousands of years, every several hundred. It's just that some of the effects are kind of mild and they're not massively destructive. We've had a bit of a lull point, but that's what I wanted to get into. So
I was actually a long time ago, just wanted to mention this, big fan of Randall Carlson, like I mentioned. And I actually contacted him and I said, Randall brought up some patterns and he went into these things showing that the Egyptian pyramid and stuff had numerical significance. They understood things that we take for granted. We don't really realize how intelligent these people were who helped build these structures. And I'm not saying ancient aliens, okay? I'm not saying that, okay? We're not trying tinfoil hat, like don't throw stones at us. But I have had this, I want my audience to understand, I have had this, I'm a skeptic, okay? I am a very skeptical guy. Like even what you're going to present today, I'm going to take it with a grain of salt. I'm going to hopefully try and glean from it what I can accept right now and try to work on it. And I hope they do the same, because when I looked at the biblical narratives and other mythologies, I found numerical patterns. I saw repetitive numerological significances. And to me, and I hear this all the time, dude, they're just numbers. They're just numbers. And I'm going, but the dimensions of the New Jerusalem and the dimensions of the cube and the Epic of Gilgamesh, if you do the square of this is all furlongs and talking about, there's these mathematical numbers, 72 and, these numbers that kept coming up. And I go, why are there 72 Buddhas in Indonesia as statues in the temple? Why did Jesus send forth 72? Why did Moses send forth 72? Why is these numbers there? And, one might just go, well, they just had a fascination with numbers. But these numbers go back to time, and time goes back to calendar. And how are they going to survive unless they can tell time? And I think it's more than just agricultural. They might have had some type of tradition and able to see maybe what you're going to get into a little bit here today. That's why I am open-minded to what you're going to present.
I myself, as I said, I go for advanced solutions. And I have seen a lot of researchers out there, and I don't want to be disparaging to them, but a lot of them have certain superficial connections, and they present numbers, but they don't give you the decisive breakthrough. You know what I mean? You just mentioned about why did Jesus send forth 72 messengers? You're referring to Luke 9 and 10. And I know the exact solution to that, and I will tell you straight out right now. The messengers go in pairs, right? Let's suppose, and I have a slideshow. This is the very lengthy presentation. I'm not going to get into this, but I'll just tell you straight out. As you ask. The pairs, who are the messengers that Jesus sends out? And why there's 72 and why do they go in pairs? The correct answer is the messengers are Mars and Venus. If you have Mars and Venus in alignment, the Sun, Venus and Mars all lined up, 12 noon, how many days does it take for them to reconjunct? And the answer is about 300 and, I think it's 332 days or so. And basically, they go forwards, or rather anti-clockwise, 175 degrees when they reconjunct again. So how many conjunctions does it take for them to go all the way back to 12 noon? And the answer is 72, okay? And there's a reference in another, I think it's the Gospel of Matthew, when Jesus is asked about forgiveness, and he says something like, how many times are you supposed to forgive people? 70 times 7. This is a tie-in to Mercury, and it's also a tie-in to the 72 messengers. Firstly, 2 are sent on their own, and then the rest, the other 70. And there's a reason why 70 are sent first, because that ties into the Earth. But that specific story is all about the most important destructive alignment that we have, a recurring alignment. And it's the alignment of Mars, Venus, the Sun, and Mercury, in that order, targeting close to the galactic center, whilst simultaneously the Sun, the Earth, and the Pleiades star group are in alignment. That is the critical alignment that the Mayan long count was used to target. And it's also the exact same one mentioned in Luke 9 and 10. And you see Jesus in that very story, 9 and 10. He says to his servants when they return, he says to them, you know, did you see, I give you the power to tread on scorpions and serpents. Nothing will hurt you. Your names are written in heaven. If you look to the galactic center area and you're where Mars and Venus and you're looking down that alignment, the alignment is targeting the midpoint between the sting of the scorpion's tail, Shaula, and Z Serpentis, the lowest star of the serpent's tail constellation. That's where the sun is when the alignment goes. And you know, 2 of his messengers initially say to them when they're rejected, shall we rain down fire upon them? And Jesus says, no. Why? Why no? Well, because they're in the wrong houses. You know, he says, go and knock on all these houses. Tell them I'm coming. He's not talking about houses on earth. He's talking about houses of the zodiac. And the alignment is in the right part of the sky. Then we rain down fire. And the critical date for that is well, he gives 2, but there's the 4th of November, 1345. And we've even got a reference in Clube and Napier I'm going to get into. But anyway, let me...
I don't want to stop you, but I just want to say that same... I can't take this literal, man. And this is why I have a hard time, but I take it in a esoteric sense. I think this star mythology and some interesting stuff like you're talking about esoterically and allegory and stuff, but it is literally something other than what, and maybe we can internalize these things, but what I was going to say is Elijah does the same thing. So this is why we have patterns, and I love this. So I almost want to call this like patterns, some title to do with patterns, brother, but thank you so much. I'm ready.
All right, let's get the presentation on the screen share then. This one here to begin. Right. Do you see my screen? You see this first slide here? It says special conjunction patterns. Yep. I don't think I can hear you. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. So
I'm just on mute. I don't want any disruptions.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So, okay then. So what I'm going to basically do here is just give you a bit of a summary. As I said, I've got very lengthy presentations, but I'm just going to try and summarize the analysis here. So basically, we have these ideas of world ages. And when we have certain special alignments that occur, they cause the solar system to go into a kind of resonant agitation. In the Bible, in the Nag Hammadi text, it talks about the celestial spheres cancel their circuits and the celestial powers are shaken. Okay? So when we get alignments, we can have all kinds of exotic things occur. We can have geophysical effects, which is the first thing here mentioned. And this can be caused by the simultaneous resonant agitation of all the celestial bodies in the solar system. So it's not just the Earth, right? You can also have the other bodies itself agitated. So you can have heightened seismic activity, even planet-wide, and you can have a temporary disruption to the axial rotation speed of the Earth itself. So this is where you get people talking about the sun slowing down in the sky. There's certain Greek mythological stories about that. And it's only a temporary thing. It speeds back up to its 24-hour rotation period, but there are disruptions like this. A lot of the disruptions that occur, unless they cross certain critical thresholds, we haven't gone past a fundamental change. It returns to the way it was. So we can have that effect there. Then we can have the planets can develop cometary properties. Planets themselves, like Venus or Mercury, they can ignite to develop cometary properties, long tails, and the Earth itself might get caught up in some of the cometary debris from Venus, because when you have a conjunction, say between Venus and the Earth, if Venus has got a long tail stretching tens of millions of miles away, and that's absolutely kind of standard, you can have that, in astronomy, even with the very small comets, but comets always point away from the sun. So the Earth can cross through Venus's cometary stream, and we appear to have had that in the past as well. So this is why when we get a lot of these disaster stories, they talk about comets being seen in the sky, but they're not always small little comets. They're actually the planets that have become comets and developed cometary properties. You can also have blasted off, I know this might sound very strange, but you can also have blasted off into space material debris from the planets. They don't just develop cometary tails with small like halos and dust and wherever. You see, we've got small comets that we've seen blasting off material, from certain close studies of them. And imagine everything scaled up. So instead of a small comet blasting off significant size chunks, you can get a planet like Venus blasting off material as well as long cometary tails. So this is where we get these meteor bombardments from. And this is what happened in 10,964 BC or whatever, with a disaster alignment there. We can then get, and the third thing in this, we can get changes to the sun itself. It can change its color. The light waves can develop coherency and via destructive interference cancel one another out. So you've heard about days of darkness. It's not due to just an eclipse. The sun itself, literally, its light waves can reflect back into themselves, and the sun itself temporarily, as a visible emitter of light, seems to just shut down. It's gone outside of our normal spectrum. This is where we get the references in esoteric literature to the dragon of the outer darkness with its tail in its mouth. It's swallowing its own light waves, so to speak. So these are the kinds of things that you get when you get certain special patterns, okay? And this is what I'm going to get into. Events like Exodus, Noah's flood, Crucifixion Day, they occurred when we had certain special configurations which triggered some of these effects here. So I'm going to show you precise screenshots, precise times of some of these alignments and tie them together with some esoteric calendar cycles. So the analysis then, if I go to this one here, I'm going to use the Starry Night program, which is a really good program to use. And for all you people out there to be able to check my data, I'm going to give you precise dates, not only calendar dates, as you can see on the left here, but the Julian day numbers as well. You can see those here. If you're into astronomy software, when you've got your normal calendar dates, you can also have them, they have an absolute day number, a Julian day number. And I'm going to be adding or subtracting one Julian day number from another between calendar dates so that we're dealing with high precision. We're not caught out with leap years or anything like that. But they'll be showing Julian day numbers alongside their calendar dates. So if you're into astronomy software, you'll be able to do that. So let's begin with the first event, the Exodus event, a very real event. Some people think it occurred around about the mid-13th century. That's actually quite wrong. The people that favor mid-15th century BC, they are correct, okay? So let's see if we can just target it. Well, it's associated with some sort of disaster alignment, and comets are a part of that. So here's an article I just want to show you on screen. This is from the Ancient Origins website, and somebody was talking all about a comet. So this is a little quotation. It states here, A comet was recorded by the Egyptians in the 22nd year of the reign of the pharaoh Thutmose III, who described it as a brilliant disk much larger than the full moon, adding that it was a marvel never before known since the foundation of this land. And Chinese astronomers, recorded it. All really amazing. Now, this talks about it then being in the 22nd year of Pharaoh Thutmose III. Well, let's look in Wikipedia at Thutmose III. Wikipedia saves us. The Orthodox Egyptologists here, they've got this guy's date nailed. I mean, seriously, this is it. His reign is usually dated, it says, from 24th of April, 1479 BC to 11th of March, 1425. But here's the interesting thing. There's no mention of a comet, but it goes on to say, from the age of 2 until his death at age 56. Okay, it says, however, during the first 22 years of his reign, he was co-regent. Now, the very fact that we've got this comet sighted 22 years into his reign, and he's co-regent for 22 years, very interesting. But all we need is the date here, 1479. All we need to do is go forwards 22 years, and we get to 1457 BC. This is the year of Exodus. Okay? It was triggered by a planetary alignment. So all I did was go into Starry Night, top-down view of the solar system, plugged in 1457 BC, 1st of January, hit the play button, and watch the planets do their dance. And you're watching and you're watching and you're watching until suddenly an exceptional alignment just comes out of nowhere and you hit this pause button. The alignment in question is this one. 4-body direct alignment between Mars, the Earth, Mercury, and Venus on the 28th of March, 1457 BC, okay? This alignment was the destructive alignment that triggered cometary properties, I would imagine, between Venus and Mercury. And this is what they were looking at, okay? So, but just to give you another interesting point here, we know in esoteric literature, the Pleiades is a very important star grouping. And the reason for it is, you usually get alignments. A lot of these alignments, you see there are certain dangerous directions in the sky. And when you get alignments in these directions, that's, so, I mean, you can get 4-body alignments, kind of they're not too irregular, but getting them at certain points, targeting certain parts of the sky is a lot more rare. If we position ourselves at the center of Mars and look all the way down the line of this alignment at its optimum, right here to the day, here is what we see. It's lined up brilliantly with the Pleiades, barely half a degree or so, okay? Noah's flood involved a very special configuration, which was also tied in to the Pleiades, by the way, but that's another presentation. Noah's flood did occur in 2348 on the 27th of September, but I didn't want to get into that one, so otherwise we'd not have enough time. So here we've got the alignment. This
real quick question pertaining to that, because when we for example, like Noah's flood happening on those days, I know you didn't want to get into it. We get a lot of material you got to cover here. But I do want to ask, when it comes to stuff like that, when you're dating this, are you using like more than just the biblical narrative to try and find an actual event that occurred, and not just saying, well, the Bible says, and then I'm just going with what the Bible itself saying, but I'm actually trying to find like outside resources that suggest something happened during that time? Kind of like, because a lot of people say, is this a global flood? Is it an earthly flood, a local flood? I know some people think it's a celestial flood too. So as above, so below concept. So anyway, I just didn't want to sidetrack, but for our audience, most of the people who watch my channel are skeptical and they don't take like the Bible at its word necessarily. So that'll be something to keep in mind as we go,
For the work I did on Noah's flood, there's a lot. You see, I look at physical evidence, and in one of the slides I'm going to be showing in particular is going to summarize it. We have physical evidence of disasters, okay? And not just sightings. Sometimes we have sightings, and in some of these cases, I'm talking about direct witness type sightings of comets in the sky. We also have tree ring data pointing to disasters, ones in 536 AD, for example. We have the massive plague from a comet 1345, Noah's flood. There's a series of data pointing towards geological instability. Again, it's in the physical record, circa 2350 BC. There's a few citations from articles I've seen there. We also have for 30, there's another, the alignment I was referring to with the Pleiades, to do with Luke 9 and 10. That alignment there, so with the Mayan calendar, that was 3153 BC is the precise calendar date of the alignment. 3150 BC, we've got evidence in the magnetic field disruption of the geomagnetic spike, which is associated with cometary impacts. That's for the work of Professor Ioannis Laritsis, I believe. So I do look at the physical evidence to try to get ballpark times, and then I look to see if there's some kind of special alignments going off there, and I try to figure out the calendar systems. So I try to tie together physical evidence of disaster to calendar system cycles, and also some of the clever encoding in such works as the Bible. So I do try to get all of this stuff tied together, so it's not just relying upon biblical interpretation. So I'm going to get into some of those slides, which do, as I said, some of the cometary stuff, though, that is the visual sightings. You don't, if we get caught in the cometary stream, you don't necessarily have, if it's a bit subtle, you don't necessarily have physical evidence for all these disruptions, especially if they're more celestial than massive disruption to the tectonic plates. But I know what you're saying, I know what you're saying. But I'm going to try and tie some of this together. So I'm going to just move on to the Bible still. And this, we're going to look at this is a reference, and I've got some physical data I'm going to show you for this one. This is interesting. This is a celestial upheaval under King Uzziah of Judah. And I'm going to show you a few Bible passages first off. But first, we're going to go to Immanuel Velikovsky, because he mentions this in his Worlds in Collision book, right? So he talks about in the 8th century, it states here, in the days of Uzziah, king of Jerusalem, there occurred a devastating catastrophe called rash or commotion. Amos, who lived at the time of Uzziah, began to predict a cosmic upheaval before it took place. And it was made 2 years before, okay? So bearing that in mind, let's just have a look at the Bible with Book of Amos. This is just chapter 1, and it's just a bit of a summary here, This guy Amos then is concerning 2 years before an earthquake, is going on about, I'm going to send fire upon all these different places, Gaza, Tyrus, Tema, and all the rest of it. And then he goes on to say, chapter 2, I'm going to send fire on Moab and fire on Judah, devour all the palaces of Jerusalem, So this is what we're getting at here. Now, here's another interesting thing, chapter 5. This is where we get another reference. Ye who turn judgment to wormwood and leave off righteousness in the earth, seek him that maketh the 7 stars, the Pleiades, and Orion, and turneth the shadow of death into the morning, and maketh the day dark with night. And is basically, again, encoding in a kind of elaborate sense some of the elements in the sky which are associated with a disaster alignment. But let's just go again to Velikovsky, because Velikovsky nailed the date precisely for this. He looked at certain records to do with various, let me show you here. This again is Velikovsky then, and he nailed it to 747. And this is because of certain New Year traditions in Mexico, when he went there to study the cultures of the Aztecs and whatever, and their New Year's. So this is from Velikovsky again. It says, the year 747, if the commotion of the days of Uzziah was a global character and was brought about by an extraterrestrial agent, it must have caused some disturbance in the motion of the Earth on its axis along its orbit. Such a disturbance would have made the old calendar obsolete and would have required the introduction of a new calendar. In 747 BC, a new calendar was introduced in the Middle East, and that year is known as the beginning of the era of Nabonassar. He first talks about the Middle East, but he also talks about Mesoamerica, and I'm going to get into that shortly. He says, it is asserted that some astronomical event gave birth to this new calendar, but the nature of the event is not known. So we've got a calendar tradition, something in 747 BC, a new calendar. But we also have this big earthquake. Do we have any evidence of this? Yes. This is a scientific article here talking about a magnitude earthquake. And this again is from various studies. It says earthquake debris at 6 sites. This is all around, Israel. It says it's tightly confined stratigraphically to the middle of the 8th century BC, with dating errors of about 30 years. So the evidence points to a single large regional earthquake that occurred about 750 BC, at least 7.8 in magnitude, maybe even 8.2. And it says here, it appears to be the largest yet documented on the Dead Sea Transform Fault Zone during the last 4 millennia. And the Dead Sea Transform Fault likely ruptured along more than 400 kilometers as the ground shook violently over 90 seconds. The urban panic created by this earthquake would have been legendary. So they've got, the physical evidence of a massive earthquake studying the fault zone, 750 BC. But the calendar system Velikovsky looks at, he gets this change in calendar 747 BC, allowing us just to narrow it down. But Velikovsky narrows it down brilliantly even further. It says here, firstly, we know when Uzziah reigned, between 789 and about 740. And again, this is a direct quote from his book. He says, if this conclusion is correct, the upheaval took place in 747 BC. The computation according to which the era started on the 26th day of February must be re-examined in light of the fact that further cosmic disturbances occurred in the decades that followed. And then he goes on to say, it is worth noting that the ancient inhabitants of Mexico celebrated their new year on the day which corresponds in the Julian calendar to the same date. The first day of their year was the 6th and 20th day of February. So if this is the first day of the new year, 26th of February, 747 BC, we need to just go to the final day. In other words, 1 day prior to this is the final end of age day. And if we do that and look right down on the solar system, on the 25th of February, here is what we see. A 4-body alignment here. And this involves the Earth, Venus, and Mars, but also the dwarf planet Ceres, okay? Now, Ceres is located between Mars and Jupiter. It's in the asteroid belt, the largest object there. It's about, 600 miles in diameter. Our moon is about 2,160 miles, so it's only a small body, but it's a proper spheroid body. It's not a jagged edge fragment, so it's an important planet. And I'll just show you that if you are going to program this into, you need to use the correct solution, because the JPL guys, this is the solution that they had on the screen. And this is what I call the miracle Ceres solution. They had this and then they modified it and degraded it so it were even worse. But you must use, I had to manually program these elements into Starry Night to create Ceres. I couldn't use the default one because they modified it. But they had this solution here. And you will find Ceres is involved in many end-of-age alignments, but you must use this solution. That's just for astronomers though, but let's just move on back to the alignment. If we are now located at the center of the Earth and we look all the way down the line, okay, this is where we've got Ceres, Venus, and Mars just off to the right here. But you've also got Neptune, Uranus aligned, right? And look, the Pleiades is right there. It's again just a couple of degrees off, and it's one of those special directions in the sky. Remember what Amos said about the Pleiades, but he also mentioned Orion. So we're just looking at this from the perspective of the center of the Earth, right at the time, 12 noon universal time, 25th of February, right? If we pull back a bit, but maintain the same date, okay, and we're still from the center of the Earth, we can see a connection between Orion and the Pleiades connection here. This is what we see. If we have got the constellation of Orion here, then basically from Betelgeuse, if we look at the direct line, it crosses through this critical star, Pi3 Orionis, straight line all the way, and that targets Ceres. And if we are this other star here, Scythe, and we again go through Pi3 Orionis, we go all the way to the center of the Pleiades, and it practically cuts through, aligning brilliantly with that slight offset, Neptune and Uranus, okay? This is the connection of Orion linking to the Pleiades, and it's all part of Amos's encoding this configuration, and this nails the date of the 25th of February. So we've got the encoding from the astronomy, from the Bible. We've got the Mexican New Year tie-in. We've got the earthquake mentioned in the Bible. We've got the Dead Sea transform fault zone circa 750, So this is the kind of work I do. I look to try and tie it all together with the physical evidence and the encoding, that kind of thing, okay? But this is where we get now to some of the advanced mathematics of it. Because this disaster alignment in 747 BC, a calendar system was set in motion to target this alignment from the Exodus alignment, using the 360-day calendar with a special adjustment. So if we go all the way back here then, this is the Exodus day of alignment, 28th of March, right here. So how do you calculate, how do you target this future alignment of disaster? Okay, well, firstly, you have a special adjustment of 96 days. Now, I realize you're thinking 96 days, I'm being a bit convenient here. 96 days is used as a correction multiple times. It's used in the Mayan long count before they target a disaster alignment involving 3 back tons. So it's used multiple times, 96 days. And what they do is, they basically are going to count a 360-day calendar, okay? But what they do first is they count 96 days as a special count, okay? Then they begin counting 360 days, and they count precisely 720 of these ideal years, right? Which is 720 is 2 times 360, okay? So it's 720 cycles of 360 days after a 96-day correction, and then you target with perfection the date here, 25th of February, the precise day of the destructive alignment, okay? And this is the kind of stuff that's been going on in ancient times, okay? High precision targeting of future disasters. It's not all about prophecy in the sense of some guy's been told some information or had a vision. People have been given, or they've been given this esoteric calendar knowledge. They're using calendars to actively track these disasters centuries in advance, okay? So let's just move on to another one. We're now going to go from Exodus to the destruction of the army of Sennacherib. Instead of just Exodus to that disaster in 747, what they end up doing is running multiple calendars in parallel to one another. So we're going to target another day of disaster. This one's from Uzziah, okay? This is just the destruction of the army of Sennacherib, okay? So Sennacherib has got his army and they're all massed around Jerusalem. It's a big siege type situation. And so he goes to, King Hezekiah goes to Isaiah and says, "What, can you just ask the Lord, is he going to help me out or whatever? I'm surrounded here." And Isaiah comes back, says, "Don't worry about a thing. The Lord says he's going to blast Sennacherib's army, okay? Behold, I will send a blast upon him," So what happens is this. Then the angel of the Lord went forth and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000, that is 185,000 men. When they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses. Okay, now I'll just tell you as a little aside here. 185,000 for the number of men in Sennacherib's army is a total fiction. As a matter of fact, it's 185,000 days backwards from the day of this disaster, which, with again a slight adjustment, gets you to, I believe it's 1193 BC, when there's this comet which caused a disaster in that year, okay? And he's basically giving you, he's encoding the time interval between this disaster and one that occurred in the past. So that number 185,000 is a kind of fictitious embellishment. Yes, Sennacherib had an army, but somebody has embellished the story with a special number of days, which, is it's encoded as a number of days, but it's given as a number of men in his army, okay?
I see that a lot, yeah. And so is that special adjustment 96 days again, or is it a different type of?
I think it's 196 days in that one.
Okay.
But again, I ain't got slides prepared for that one, but it's...
No, you're fine. I just figured I'd ask.
Yeah. But anyway, so again, what is the precise day then of disaster that we have right here? What is the day? Well, you know, a lot of people into Velikovsky. So I was watching, you know, I like watching YouTube people, other researchers talking about Velikovsky. And they were talking about his work done with regards to the Exodus. And I've just done a screen print of somebody else's slide just to show you what they said, right? So this is all about the Exodus disaster. Now, I've already shown you the date, 1457 BC. But what they then go on to say, they talk about certain critical passages in the Bible, right? When we're going to begin this new age, okay? So I've highlighted, this is somebody else's slide, and they put down 3 days after the third new moon following their departure, following the Exodus disaster, there were thundering and lightnings and a loud trumpet blast, and the Lord came down on Mount Sinai, and heavens did bow, and the earth did shake. And it said, according to Hebrew tradition, all nations heard the roaring of the law-giving and herald the start of the seventh world age. It says W&C Part 1. That would be worlds in collision. So when I saw this reference here, 3 days after the third new moon, that's when the moon is in a silhouette. It's between the earth and the sun. Third day following the third new moon. Well, because we know the exact date of Exodus, we can work out exactly when this is. So let's have a look. This here is the date then, because Exodus alignment was on the 28th of March, 1457. On the 7th of July, we are now, I've gone forward, so we're on, this is precisely, okay, the third new moon after the Exodus alignment. So we go forwards 3 more days from this. So we go from the 7th to the 10th. So the moon's just gone here, right? It was at its optimum full moon when it's aligned with the sun. So this is the precise day referenced in the Bible, third day after the third new moon. Okay, well, here's where things get very, very interesting. Let's just move on. We are now, on this particular day, third day after the third new moon, we are now precisely on the 10th of July, and we're 104 days after the Exodus alignment. So, it's at this moment then that something very interesting happens. We're going to set in motion a calendar system. A calendar system which is actually based upon, it's one that the ancient Hebrews know about, but they've practically forgotten about it. But it's one that is well known in Mesoamerica. The Aztecs and the Mayans use this calendar system, okay? But before we start counting it, we need a special adjustment. And here's where all the clever mnemonics come in, you know? When you've got your third day of the third new moon, right there, before you begin counting the calendar cycle, which is going to target the day of disaster, right? Moses is at Mount Sinai, and the Lord says to him, okay, Moses, I want you to start counting a calendar cycle. But before you do, I want you to count 6 times 6 times 6 days, which is 216 days, okay? So you're already on the third day following the third new moon, and you count an additional 216 days. Mathematically, it's a clever mnemonic. You know, like third day of the third new moon, and then you have another adjustment of 6 times 6 times 6 days, 216 days. So if you do this, you're on the 11th of February, 1456. And it is at this point that the ancient Hebrews start counting a calendar cycle. And the calendar cycle they count is based upon 819 days.
Well, real quick, I just thought it'd be funny to let people know 144 cubits is 216 feet. So in measurement, in terms of distance, space and time, so to speak, here you have 144 cubits equals 216 feet, which is interesting, that number 216, 6 times 6 times 6. So yeah.
Yeah, they use multiples of 6 a lot of times, you know, as a kind of special adjustment before setting in motion some calendar cycles. And this is an example here. So from what I gather, if you look up 819 days as a calendar cycle, yes, we know, because we've got stone carved monuments that scholars have looked at, the ancient, Mayans and the Aztecs and wherever, they used an 819-day calendar cycle. It's just that modern scholars have no idea what they used it for. They've kind of forgotten that, okay? But trust me, they did. We've got the stone carvings to prove they used an 819-day calendar cycle. The ancient Hebrews also used one, but they seem to have almost forgotten about it. But this is the cycle that was set in motion after we've done this, firstly, 104 days, and then an extra 216 days. That's 320 days exactly from Exodus. And we start counting, right, cycles of 819 days, okay? Now, the reason why I point out that the special adjustment of 216 days, whatever you want to think about the Lord at Mount Sinai, a conversation, let's just say a conversation took place, Moses and the Lord. And the Lord says, when the third day of the third new moon, the Lord says, okay, Moses, you just need to count 6 times 6 times 6 days, 216 days. Then you're going to start counting cycles of 819 days. Well, you know what every Jew's favorite number is? 7. Number 7. They love the number 7, don't they?
That's true.
I've even seen rabbis joke about it. Why do they like the number 7 so much? This rabbi was watching, he was doing a presentation, and he just jokingly said, just multiply everything by 7 and it all makes sense. I was still laughing at that one because how true it is. So when Moses asks the Lord, if I'm going to count these cycles of 819 days to target some future disaster, how many cycles do I count? And the Lord said unto Moses, you shall count 7 times 7 times 7 cycles of 819 days. Now, 7 times 7 times 7 is 343. So if you multiply that by 819, you get 280,917 days. And if you count precisely that number of days from this here, from the 11th of February, you get to the 23rd of March, 687 BC. This is when Sennacherib's army was destroyed. Now, how sure am I? Let's firstly have a look from a top-down view of the solar system, okay, on this precise date. And this is what we see. 2 alignments offset from one another. Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and simultaneously Jupiter, Sun, Ceres, okay? Now, I will tell you straight out, it's part of my more in-depth analysis. In Greek mythology, there's a story about Phaethon, who is the child of the sun, who is killed by Jupiter with a thunderbolt. That story encodes this alignment. Ceres is Phaethon, Jupiter is Zeus, and Jupiter basically has a kind of energetic exchange with Ceres, which causes Ceres to develop cometary properties. It triggers it. Okay, so in Greek mythology, this precise date, 23rd of March, 687 BC, is the story of Phaethon. But in the Bible, it's the destruction of the army of Sennacherib. We get some kind of blasts going off, and the earth is struck by, cometary debris, things like that. And this is the alignment. Now, what I want to show you, though, is, how we've seen the Pleiades so often associated with these alignments, okay? If we position ourselves at the center of Jupiter and look all the way down the line, especially towards Ceres, we see the following. There's the Pleiades, lined up as part of the alignment here with the Sun and Ceres. And here, at the center of Jupiter, Mars and Venus in close alignment, okay? Now, Velikovsky, again, in his book Worlds in Collision, the only problem Velikovsky had, and I have so much sympathy for it, I feel for him. Worlds in Collision came out in 1950. PCs did not exist. This guy did the research and found the correct dates, but he could not look at the solar system to see the alignments associated with it. He didn't know why these dates were the right ones. But in Worlds in Collision, then, here's a few passages from it, okay? Because he was trying to figure out when Sennacherib's army was destroyed. And he got the data from various Jewish traditions and Chinese astronomical records. This is what he found. He's talking about the army of Sennacherib being destroyed then. And he says, well, for a more exact date for the night of the annihilation, modern research, we know that it was the year 687 BC, okay? Talmud and Midrash give another valuable clue. The destruction occurred during the first night of Passover, okay? And then he goes on to talk about Chinese records. And the quote here at the bottom, the year 687 BC, in the summer, in the fourth moon, in the day Sin Mao, 23rd of March, during the night, the fixed stars did not appear, though the night was clear. In the middle of the night, stars fell like rain. Something very extraordinary was going off in the solar system. The next page, the date 23rd of March. It's Biot's calculation. It says, though the night was clear, a star fell in the form of rain. And then it goes on. The annals of the bamboo books obviously refer to the same event, when they inform us that in the 10th year of the Emperor Kui, the 17th emperor of the dynasty Yu, or the 18th monarch since Yahoo, the 5 planets went out of their courses. Again, shaking, you know, the Earth's shaking, so the planets just look a bit like they're going off course here a bit. In the night, stars fell like rain. The Earth shook, and they give it here, the 23rd of March, 687 BC. And that alignment, 2 alignments offset involving Jupiter, okay? Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, Ceres, Sun, with the Pleiades. That was the alignment that triggered it. And they knew about it centuries in advance. They had a calendar system targeting it, okay? So this is where, and the reason why I'm so happy to show you that alignment is because this is crucial. Because that alignment was a bona fide end-of-age alignment involving some destructive effects. We're now going to go on to discuss Crucifixion Day. Okay? Now, yeah. So, Jesus is around at the time. And what is he telling people? He's saying, guys, get ready. The kingdom of heaven is near. There's going to be all kinds of signs in the sky. Moon's going to go blood red. Sun's going to go black. Oh, and by the way, you lot, this generation, you that I'm speaking to, you will live to see it all. He's absolutely correct. Well, how do we determine Crucifixion Day? Let's have a look. We use the alignment date, the 23rd of March, 687 BC, destruction of the army of Sennacherib. We use this precise alignment day here in order to target Crucifixion Day, okay? So, we're going to do it using the 360-day calendar system. This is what Jesus did. This here is absolutely confirmed in the Bible. So, do we start counting cycles of 360 days straight away in order to target the Crucifixion Day? No, the harmony does not exist. We need a special adjustment. And what adjustment do we use before we start counting? 6 times 6 times 6 days. 216 days again. This takes us to the 25th of October, 687 BC. Now we start counting cycles of 360 days. How many do we count? And the answer, we love our mnemonics. 9 times 9 times 9. That's 729 cycles of 360 days. And if you do that, you drop on the 3rd of May, 33 AD. Is this Crucifixion Day? No, we've overshot the mark. We all know there's a certain guy who is intimately associated with the crucifixion story, Judas, okay? We all know the story of Judas. He betrays Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Now, if you're into astrology, you know that the sun is gold. The sun is gold, but the moon is silver. And when somebody says, how many days are there in a month? You're going to say, well, 30. 30 usually, in the sense of an ideal month, yes. 360 days for an ideal year. As a calendar cycle, 30 days for a month. The story of Judas is the story of the backward correction of 30 days from this date, 3rd of May 33 AD. But what else do we know about Judas? Well, it's in the Gospel of Matthew. Apparently, he's so guilt-ridden by this money that he tries to give it away, for the temple or whatever. But they don't want it because it's blood money. And what's the colour of blood? Red. So you've got 30 pieces of silver. He's instructing you to go backwards from this date here, 30 days, until you get to this date here. And this is Crucifixion Day, 3rd of April, 33 AD. Now, there's a few other people got this date. They're correct about it, but they don't necessarily know why. What makes it so decisive? Well, firstly, let's just go on to mention the following. If you do a quick check of a Passover calculator, 3rd of April, 33 AD, this is from midrash.org. If you put it in here, Julian calendars at the bottom left, 33 of April, 3rd AD, it's 15 Nisan, okay? Now, 15 Nisan, as all Jews know, that's Passover Day, okay? That's Passover Day. It always occurs on 15 Nisan. And that ties into certain things in the Bible, okay? But let's have a look then. So what's so special about Crucifixion Day? Well, in order to understand it, let's just introduce you to the following little guy. I suppose Elon Musk might say this is an absolute unit, but you know the reference. So again, this guy here then, this is a ram. Rams are male sheep, and lambs, you've got ewe lambs and ram lambs, they're young sheep, okay? So I just thought I'd mention lambs. Let's now talk about another lamb, the Lamb of God. This is a picture here from 1432 or circa AD by Jan van Eyck, Adoration of the Mystic Lamb. And it says here, Lamb of God. It says here, Jesus is usually referred to when John the Baptist sees Jesus and exclaims, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Okay? Christian doctrine holds that divine Jesus chose to suffer crucifixion at Calvary as a sign of his full obedience to the will of his divine Father as an agent and servant of God. In Christian theology, the Lamb of God is viewed as foundational and integral to the message of Christianity. This picture here, you've got the lamb and it's like wounded and it's pouring blood into this chalice, right? And you've also got some angels stood around and you've got the cross, the Crucifixion Day. This is a kind of allegorical crucifixion scene. The Lamb of God is present on Crucifixion Day, okay? And we're going to see that very shortly. But firstly, let's just go to the next slide. So this is the 3rd of April, 33 AD, precisely 12 noon universal time, a whole number of Julian days. And we're at the center of the earth, and we are looking towards the moon, okay? And there's the moon, bright silver. But remember, the Judas month is associated with blood. If we make just a slight adjustment here, very so slightly, and go backwards, forwards in time, 2 hours, 51 minutes, you'll see the moon is kind of blood red. This is because on the 3rd of April, 33 AD, we have a lunar eclipse. And this is the significance of the blood money reference, 30 pieces of silver, a 30-day movement backwards to a blood moon, a lunar eclipse. This here then, on 1451 universal time, is the optimum when the moon is at its deepest red, okay? We are at the optimum right here of the eclipse. Now, if we position ourselves at the center of the moon and look towards the center of the earth, we will see the Lamb of God. So, here it is. Aries, the constellation. Aries, the ram, the lamb. And I've got here, you can see at the bottom, I've had to do a silhouette. This is the Starry Night package. This is where the Earth is shown. I've had to put a little blue ring around it because it's just a silhouette. And the sun is actually behind the Earth because it's a lunar eclipse, okay? So you can't even see it. But what I want to draw your attention to then is, when we're right here at the optimum, okay, there's certain special relations between the center of the Earth and certain stars associated with Aries. You will find that the arc measure between the center of the Earth and Hamel and the center of the Earth and Sheraton, practically dead on optimum. And you know, we think about lambs having or rams having the throats cut, sacrificed, and all the rest of it. This is all tied into the symbolism, but it's all to do with this astronomical alignment right here. Okay, it's all to do with this alignment. And this is where you have this angular offset almost perfectly matched here. But this isn't the only thing that's significant about this date. It's not just the lunar eclipse. Let's have a top-down view of the solar system right on the 3rd of April, same date. This is what you see. Two alignments going off at the same time. Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Ceres, Sun, and also Mercury. Now, if we position ourselves at the center of Jupiter and look all the way down the line, we also find that Pluto is part of the alignment, amazingly enough. So there are the planets there, all lined up. And then we've got Mars and Venus here. We're at the center of Jupiter, so Jupiter's aligned separately to these two groups, okay? So let's just have a look again from the top view. There it is. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you get certain special alignments, you get energetic effects. And alignments which are of a similar type also, because they are so similar, can also produce the same effects. Does this pattern look familiar? Well, let's just lay this pattern side by side to the destructive alignment of 687 BC. And there you have it. 687 BC, top left, Jupiter, Venus, Mars. And here at Crucifixion Day, Jupiter, Mars, Venus. Top left here, Jupiter, Sun, Ceres. Crucifixion Day, Jupiter, Ceres, Sun. Same bodies aligned, but the order is switched, but the energetic effects are still present. And this was a bona fide event. So when people talked about things going strange on Crucifixion Day, for example, this guy here wrote all about it. The testimony fliegen vindicated, or an account of the great darkness and earthquake at our Saviour's passion. That's exactly what happened. We're all supposed to pretend, though, that it didn't happen, you know. But it did happen. The moon went blood red, the sun darkened at midday, and it was because the sun's light waves were temporarily cancelled because of this special conjunction pattern, okay? This is what caused it to happen, okay? So that right there is how we targeted the Crucifixion Day. Now, what I want to get on to next then is part 2. And this is where I need to switch to a different file. So I'll need to just take this screen share off and switch to another file. Now, this next presentation, though, let me just stop this screen share here. So can you see me again fully? Yeah. So what I'm going to do then, I'm going to now look in some detail at some of the key parables in the life of Jesus, and I'm going to sort out some really good controversy between Jesus and John the Baptist, because there's some parables in the life of Jesus, and these parables were designed basically to target various destructive alignments, okay? They were used to target these alignments using cycles of primarily 3,200 days with certain adjustments, or cycles of 360 days. So Jesus, again, circa 2,000 years ago, that's when he was born, right? And we had these alignments, and my phone's kind of ringing there. I think they'll ring back.
I don't think we can hear it, so you're good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll just let it ring. So basically, the second presentation then is going to look at the parables of Jesus, and it's going to look at precisely just how he targets certain end-of-age alignments, okay? Very special alignments in the future, which are very destructive. So, in fact, can you just hold on a minute? It's just really ringing here. Just one moment. It was wrong number. I can't believe it.
The stars didn't line up this time.
So I think you said He said, "Oh, is that Uncle Cleggy or something?" I thought, "What?"
Like, dude, I'm in the middle of a serious, and
Hello.
well, I have so many ideas. I just want you to present today, because I definitely want to have you come back too. We can wrestle with ideas and kind of like discuss different things, because I think that you're on to something. There's something here. And in me being a skeptic, okay, I look at the New Testament, and this is just my hunch, and I'm just throwing it out there for our audience who's gotten this far. I am no scholar. I cannot speak definitively on this, but like stuff like, let's say like Herod going after all the 2-year-olds and under, we know that copies from the Exodus. We have no sources outside of what we have in the gospel narrative to suggest that Herod really was doing that historically. But I had this recent interview I did with a lady named Lena Einhorn. She looked at Josephus and she looked at the Gospels, and she found that the key players, not just like obscure, like, oh, well, that's up for interpretation. Like, we're talking Roman emperors and like very important high priests that were supposed to exist during the time of the 30s. They're not found there in Josephus. In fact, they're found later by 15, 20 years or something. But I asked her at the end of the day, I said, Miss Einhorn, why would they put the story, though, into the 30s? And she says, I can guess. Well, what if what you're telling me, what if this is the reason? What if just saying, let's just suppose they had such a deep connection to the celestial bodies and what happens in the heavens that they have this esoteric and religious fervor. They want to place these events close, just speculating and throwing it out there to these events that are in the heavens, just saying. Because even some people say, well, they would never have crucified this man on Passover. And they say this is possibly fiction. However, what you're telling me, in my opinion, is accurate. Like if you're going to really find the real historical, look up and stop trying to act like it literally happened in the story, in the literal sense. There's probably something there. And I could be wrong. I'm just throwing it out there.
For me, there is a connection between the Old Testament and the New Testament. I realize they're very different, but the mathematics that tie together, such as Noah's flood and the Exodus event, they integrate with the mathematics that I'm going to show you regarding the parables of Jesus. So the same tradition of embedding numbers in stories, right, it is so crucial. I mean, in Genesis, they mention 6 days of creation, and then the author wants, for some reason, to mention the seventh day 3 times, because he wants to mention the number 7 3 times. Noah, when he's releasing birds, he has 3 7-day intervals, because again, he kind of wants to mention the number 7 times, 7 3 times, and you're multiplying it together, and you're doing this for various calendar reasons. And when you look at Jesus, he's got all kinds of parables. Hey, I'm feeding 5,000 people. I'm feeding 4,000 people. I've got 12 baskets. We're going to have 7 baskets of scraps left over or whatever. There's a woman. She's had issues of the blood, i.e. blood moon hint. She said blood moon issues for 12 years. There's a young girl. She's on death's door. She dies. She's 12. Jesus raises her from the dead. All these stories. What Jesus is doing is he lives, and my view is this, and I realize you've had quite a few people on talking about Jesus, and they're looking at who is the real Jesus, and is it Robert? Is it Eisenman?
I've got tons of people. Robert and Price, Dr. Bob. There's a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, I think Robert Eisenman. I've seen a lot of his presentations, and James, the brother of Jesus, was one of his books, and and he talks about, he's trying to find out who is the real Jesus, and mentions that the Jesus of the gospel is like the literary Jesus, as he puts it, okay? Well, my personal view is, and I just look at it this way, I am interested in the mastermind behind these stories. That's Jesus for me. That's the guy I'm interested in. He may have been a guy that had a close group of people around him, and they were like scribes. And he said, listen carefully, I'm going to tell you some stories. And just like Socrates is used by Plato in his dialogues, Jesus uses himself as a central character in a fictional public life story about him traveling around to all these different places like Galilee and Bethlehem and Jerusalem and whatever, and sending messengers all over the place and, healing people. And it's all essentially fiction, but he encodes all these numbers in them. And all these numbers, they refer to basically, there's certain key alignment dates, which are like critical anchor points, like Crucifixion Day. It's a critical anchor point, and you go backwards a certain number of days to target other dates, all within his own lifetime. And all the parables with all these numbers, they're all about adjustments of days, backwards and forwards, to target critical dates within the lifetime of Jesus, which are the starting dates for setting in motion calendars based upon 360 days or 3,200 days, which target future disaster alignments centuries or millennia in advance. Now, in some senses, I do think that some of the people in the Bible, when the Gospels were written, they probably were written well after Jesus had died. And I think people have even mentioned, like, obviously Jesus is supposed to have been preaching before the temple's destroyed. And this is before the whole synagogue thing took off, from what I gather. But the synagogues mentioned in the Bible, and they shouldn't really exist. This is what another research I think you had on mentioned something like that. And so there's people talking about when Herod supposedly died or whatever. And this is why some people talk about it being the 4th century, 4 BC or 6 BC and stuff like that when Jesus is born. Well, I'm going to show you precise dates here, which I believe are the correct dates when Jesus was born, as encoded in the Bible. And that's the critical point. Somebody's trying to send a message here, and you've got to be careful in how you look at some of this detail. But I'm going to hopefully give you some very decisive solutions, which are astronomical, and we're going to sort out some hardcore controversies. So I'm going to do a screen share and show you all about the life of Jesus again with his second presentation. Right, you see it says Gospels on screen there, yeah? Okay, so let's begin, okay? So we're now going to look at when was Jesus conceived and when was he born, and also how this ties into John the Baptist. So we know what the precise day of Crucifixion Day is, okay? So let's have a look at a nice reference here to something called the Annunciation. This is when, like the angel Gabriel goes to visit Mary, Blessed Virgin Mary, and says, Mary, you're going to have a child. He's going to be really important in the eyes of God, Jesus and all the rest of it. Annunciation Day, okay? So, when is Annunciation Day? Well, here's how we target it precisely, and I do mean precisely. Firstly, we're at Crucifixion Day. Jesus supposedly dies here, the ritual. What happens 3 days later? He rose from the dead 3 days later. Go forwards 3 days. This is Resurrection Day. Annunciation Day is harmonized to this day via a 360-day cycle. Specifically, if we go back 33 cycles of 360 days, we drop on the 26th of September 1 BC. This is Annunciation Day with regards to Mary. Okay? 26th of September 1 BC. This is under the Julian calendar. Here is where the controversy begins. There are certain dates associated with the Catholic and Christian tradition which are very interesting to this story. You see, we have a date associated with Annunciation Day under the Julian calendar, which is different to the 26th of September. But that date, 26th of September, is absolutely correct. Let's look at the reference, though. This is Annunciation, and this refers to, we're going to get into it, but this is where we get the reference in the Bible. This is from the Gospel of Luke. There's something very special that we hang upon Annunciation Day for Mary, okay? And that's the birth of John the Baptist. You see, from the Gospel of Luke then, Luke 26, it says, in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to the town of Galilee and went to see Mary, okay? But here's the thing. Mary has a relative, Elizabeth, and the angel Gabriel says to Mary, he says, as I'm telling you right now, Mary, you're going to have a child, Jesus, and he's going to be really important. Well, as I am telling you right now your relative Elizabeth, I told her something very similar a few months back, and as we speak right now, she is precisely in the 6th month of her pregnancy. Now, bingo, we have it right there. We know Elizabeth is 6 months pregnant with John the Baptist on Annunciation Day. So if we want to find out when John the Baptist is born, because Elizabeth has John the Baptist as a child, right? If we want to know when John the Baptist is born, all we need to do is go forwards 3 months from Annunciation Day with respect to Mary. Now, a month is precisely 30 days in this calendar system, okay? So, let's do the math. This year, then, Annunciation for Mary. Angel Gabriel goes to see Mary, says, you're going to have Jesus. But your relative Elizabeth right now is already 6 months pregnant with John the Baptist. So John the Baptist is going to be born 3 months or 90 days after the 26th of February. So if we want to work out the day when John the Baptist is born, he was born on the 25th of December, 1 BC. Now, how controversial. I know what everyone's thinking. 25th of December, that's like Christmas. That's when Jesus was born. No, that's when John the Baptist was born, not Jesus. The cleverness continues. If we want to know when John the Baptist was conceived, it's 9 months from conception to birth, we could go back precisely 9 times 30 or 270 days from this day right here. Conception day is, of course, important, but the clever author of the Gospel of Luke does not want us to go back 270 days from this date. He wants to draw our attention to a special adjustment. So again, the Gospel of Luke. It goes on to say that after Elizabeth has given birth to John the Baptist, on the 8th day, he was circumcised. Okay? That's when he's called John, okay? So let's do the math. He's born on 25th of December. 8 days later, we're on the 2nd of January, 1 AD, John circumcised. Now, the angel of Gabriel, as I've already mentioned, visits Mary, as you can see here, on the 26th of September to say Mary's going to have Jesus. The angel Gabriel previously visited Elizabeth to say that she was going to have John the Baptist. When's Annunciation Day, essentially, with respect to Elizabeth? The answer is, if we go back 270 days, 9 months after we've had this 8-day correction, if we go back from this date here, 2nd of January, we get to Annunciation Day, which is the following. There. The 7th of April, 1 BC, Annunciation Day for Elizabeth. Now, what was that tradition again? Let me just show you. Annunciation with respect supposedly to Mary, right? The Feast of Annunciation is on the 25th of March, okay? That's what it says. Many Christians observe this event. And if you look at the bottom here, it says it's the 25th of March under the Gregorian calendar. But for those using the old-style Julian calendar, March the 25th falls on April the 7th, okay? Right there. So we have got a big problem here. The date associated with the birth of Jesus, the 25th of December, is actually the birthday of John the Baptist, not Jesus. The date, the 7th of April, associated with Annunciation respecting Mary, is not. It's actually associated with Elizabeth with regards to John the Baptist. So you see how we've got a bit of a controversy here.
You're definitely a heretic.
Oh, yes. This is hardcore heresy. But it gets better. we've got this Lamb of God reference. You know, there's such an intimate connection between John the Baptist and Jesus. And when John the Baptist first sees Jesus, he says, "Behold, the Lamb of God." There's a reference to this Lamb of God in John the Baptist. If we stick on this 7th of April date here, right, it turns out we're on a full moon on this date, 7th of April, 1 BC, Annunciation Day. So in other words, basically, Elizabeth gets visited by the angel Gabriel and says, "You're going to have a child." She's already 8 days into conception. But obviously, if you're only 8 days into conception, you wouldn't necessarily know you were pregnant, you see. Okay, but here we have this full moon. Okay, we just happen to have it on the Annunciation Day, respecting Elizabeth, 7th of April. So if we do what we did on Crucifixion Day, let's position ourselves at the center of the moon and look towards the earth. And what do we see? There's that Lamb of God again. And in this case, we've just gone forwards 12 minutes from 12 noon, still 7th of April. And this puts us at an optimum when the line connecting the sun and the earth is 90 degrees to this green line, which is the Earth's orbit around the sun. So this is the optimum, the precise optimum. And if you do that, then the following relations hold true. At that precise optimum in passing, when the line connecting the earth to the sun is at 90 degrees, we have an almost dead-on angular correspondence between the center of the earth and this 41 Arietsis and the center of the earth and Hamel. The same kind of special sort of equidistant relation, present right here. And again, let me just remind you on Crucifixion Day, right, when we did the lunar eclipse. This one was Crucifixion Day, 3rd of April, and it's center of the earth to Hamel and Sheraton. So for Jesus, it's to do with the stars corresponding to the head of Aries, whereas with John the Baptist, it's the body of Aries, okay? Very interesting, okay? But let's just move on a bit further. So Jesus is the main man here, and I've just told you all about John the Baptist, right? This is where things get quite bizarre. So, if we know when John the Baptist was conceived, we know when Annunciation Day was with respect to Elizabeth, right? And we know that John the Baptist was born 25th of December. When was Jesus conceived and when was Jesus born? He's the main man. It's quite simple. If we are here, this is when the angel Gabriel visits Mary, say, "You're going to have Jesus," okay? It's 26th of September, 1 BC. When is Jesus born? Well, the answer is 3 months later. Sorry, not born, conceived. He's conceived on the 25th of December. That is the very day that John the Baptist is born, okay? The day John the Baptist is born on the 25th, Jesus is conceived, okay? And this might be where the controversy, the kind of mix-up comes in, because if somebody says, Jesus, our Lord, entered the world on so and such date, if somebody says enter the world, yeah, most people think, yeah, they're born. But that could also mean conception. And I think that's where the mix-up is. So this is the interesting connection between Jesus and John. John's born on 25th of December. Jesus is conceived on the 25th of December, 1 BC. Now, if we know then Jesus is conceived here, we can also know when Jesus was actually born. It's 9 months later, 270 days exactly. And so let's go forwards to his birthday. This here is when Jesus was actually born. 21st of September, 1 AD. Okay? Precise date. What else do we know about the birth of Jesus? What do we all know about him? He's born of a virgin. And no, I'm not talking about Mary. Let's have a look at the virgin. This is the virgin. Virgo. The constellation, aka the maiden, the virgin, okay? Jesus is born of a virgin. Okay, so if we're looking at Virgo here, we might ask ourselves, what is the most significant star in the entire constellation? The answer is this one right here. Spica, aka Alpha Virginis, the brightest star in the entire constellation, the most important, okay? So, let's have a look at those dates again. Jesus is born then, 21st of September 1 AD, 270 days after the 25th of December 1 BC. Turns out something quite interesting about when Jesus is born. We've got a full moon. And if we've got a full moon, wouldn't it be a very interesting idea to position ourselves at the center of the moon and look to the earth? And if we do that, what do we see? What's that in the background? Virgin, the Virgo constellation. You'll see that we're at 12 noon, okay? So why don't we just go through Starry Night to optimize so that the line connecting the center of the earth to the sun is at 90 degrees right there on the most perfect optimum. And if we do that, here is what we find if we just zoom in a bit more. It turns out on that very precise optimum, the line connecting the earth to the sun cuts perfectly through Spica. And this is just 2 hours, 42 minutes from 12 noon on the same day. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the virgin birth. This is it. This is it. It's astronomical. It's not an immaculate conception. It's this alignment between the moon, the earth, and the sun cutting through Spica. Okay? But let's move on. Another interesting tradition. Jesus and John the Baptist are connected on the 25th of December 1 BC. John is born on that day. Jesus is conceived. They also meet up in life, okay? And John baptizes Jesus. So, when is Jesus baptized? Well, we again can point to a tradition, which in this case is absolutely correct. Baptism of Jesus. States here in Eastern Christianity, Jesus' baptism is commemorated on the 6th of January, Julian calendar date. Okay, 6th of January. What year? That's the crucial question. Well, once you know it's the 6th of January, if you start looking at a few different years close to, after Jesus is born, you hit upon a brilliant connection. And when you see it, you know it's the answer. You know it's the answer. So here we are then. 21st of September 1 AD. Jesus is born. How many days are there from this date to when Jesus is baptized? And the correct answer is 7,777 days. Because if you count forwards that number of days from this date, you drop upon the 6th of January on the 23 AD. That's when Jesus is baptized. Okay? Dead on. Very interesting. But let's just go further. Remember when we had the John the Baptist thing, okay? Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to actually connect up and deduce the precise date when John the Baptist dies. Now, in this case then, I've just gone backwards. I've just gone backwards here. I think I'm losing the wrong plot here. I've just gone backwards precisely 8 days from the 6th of January. You know how when John the Baptist is born, it makes a point of saying he's circumcised 8 days later. Well, when we've got this baptism date here of 6th of January, when John and Jesus are together, John baptizes Jesus, in order to determine the day when John the Baptist dies, we do a couple of adjustments. Okay, firstly, we go back 8 days. It's like that 8-day forward movement, we're almost taking it back. So we go back 8 days from here, from baptism day to the 29th of December. When we are here, we next go forwards a certain special number of days to target the precise day when John the Baptist dies. Now, how many days do we go forwards? This is incredible. You see how we have 4 sevens here. 7,777 days. The total number of days that we move forwards from the 29th of December, okay, is derived by multiplying the number 7 by itself 4 times. In other words, we go forwards 7 times 7 times 7 times 7 days. 2,401 days, okay? Right there. That's how we get to the day when John the Baptist dies, which is on the 26th of July, 29 AD. Now, what is so interesting about this, there's 2 things to consider. How old is John the Baptist when he dies? His date of death, when you look at it set against his day of birth, harmonizes to the 360-day calendar cycle. It turns out that if John the Baptist's date of death is the 26th of July, 29 AD, and we go backwards precisely 29 cycles of 360 days, which is 10,440 days, we are on the 25th of December. He's exactly 29 years old per this ideal year of 360 days, okay? But what else do we know about John the Baptist? What does everybody know? If you said, how did John the Baptist die? What does tradition tell us? He had his head cut off. We need to get into this. So, on the precise day that John the Baptist dies, in 26th of July, let's have a nice, lovely top-down view of the solar system. Wouldn't you just know it? We've got an amazing 4-body alignment. Jupiter, Earth, Venus, and Ceres. Slight adjustment, less than 24 hours, and we will be able to optimize Jupiter, the Earth, Venus, and Ceres. And if we do that, if we optimize it for those 4 bodies, and we position ourselves at the center of Jupiter and look all the way down the line on the day John the Baptist dies with just a slight adjustment backwards, 17 hours, here is what we see. Constellation Virgo. The 2 stars that mark out the head of Virgo are Zanaya and Zavijava. And from the center of Jupiter then, Ceres, Earth and Venus, the line connecting them, cuts through the head of Virgo. This is the beheading of John the Baptist, okay? This is it. And at the same time as that's at an optimum, Mercury, amazingly enough, is like precisely dead on aligned with the Zavijava, you know? It's just the top head star. Amazing. So this right here then, this is what you've got with respect to the death of John the Baptist. But now I want to get into something very interesting, because what I've been talking about how Jesus encodes in his stories future destructive alignments, and he uses cycles of 360 days, but also another very important cycle he uses is 3,200 days, units of that. And he targets certain future destructive alignments, okay, via that calendar cycle. And some of his parables are used to cleverly get you to the right date in his own lifetime to set in motion cycles of 3,200 days to target these future alignments of disaster, okay? And so let's get into looking at some of these future world age ending alignments, okay? Because Jesus targets many of them. So the first one, I'm going to do 3, in fact. Let's just summarize. You can see here in this summary here, this is how we got from the birth of Jesus, 21st of September, through to the death of John the Baptist, you know? From birth of Jesus, we go forwards here, 7,777 days to get to the 6th of January. Jesus is baptized. We minus 8 days. We then go forwards 7 times 7 times 7 times 7 days, 2,401 days. That gets us to the death of John the Baptist, okay? Hold all that there. We're just going to go backwards a little bit. Here's the death of John the Baptist then. Well, here's the death of John the Baptist. What we're going to do next then is this is actually a critical date that is used as the basis for targeting a future alignment with a special adjustment. In this case, 770 days, okay? if we go forward 770 days from the death of John the Baptist, we love these sevens, we're on the 4th of September 31 AD. We now start counting cycles of 3,200 days. And in this case, we count 150 cycles. And if we do that, we count precisely 480,000 days. And this targets the following date, the 4th of November, 1345 AD. This is when we had a massive celestial disaster. And this is associated with Revelation 12 in the Bible, okay? Let me show you a top-down view of the solar system then on this date, 4th of November, 1345. This is the most significant conjunction pattern in all the mysteries. It's a recurring pattern with one additional alignment thrown in. The core pattern is Mars, Venus, Sun, and Mercury targeting close to the galactic center, whilst simultaneously we have the Sun, the Earth targeting to the Pleiades. Now, it just so happens that at this particular time, we also have simultaneously Jupiter, Venus, and Ceres aligned. That's a kind of variant additional conjunction, but the core pattern is the Mars, Venus, Sun, Mercury, and the Sun, Earth, Pleiades. Well, this is the one that I mentioned right at the beginning of the interview, okay? So what happened when this alignment occurred? Well, let me just show you how accurate it is with respect to Venus and Mars and the Earth. So if we position ourselves at the center of the Sun and look towards the two bodies here, what have we got? Mars and Venus here, and we've also got the Earth and the Pleiades here. Okay? So that's how accurate it is. So if we reverse it and we look from the center of Mars down the line, we get the following though. Look at what's going off here. We've got the precise moment here, we've got the Sun here on the 4th of November, at the midpoint between the sting of the scorpion, Shola, and Z Serpentis. Serpent's cauda means serpent's tail. And just next to the foot of Ophiuchus constellation, okay? So this is part of the alignment, okay? Now in Luke 9 and 10, Jesus, he sends out his 72 messengers, and this is what I said at the beginning, there's 72 alignments of Venus and Mars that return them to the same point in the sky, okay? They are the messengers. So when this alignment is achieved here then, the planets go into resonant agitation and we have cometary effects generated, okay? And these would be respect to Venus and Mercury, I would imagine. And what the specific line in the Bible is, I'm just going by memory, but I'm sure everybody can look it up, is 72 messengers have all returned. And one of them says something like, you know, I watched Satan fall like lightning from the sky or something. And Jesus says, you see, I give you all powers over the enemy. I give you the power to tread on serpents and scorpions. Nothing can hurt you. Your names are written in heaven. And here we've got the foot of Ophiuchus effectively treading on the sting of the scorpion below the ecliptic and on the serpent's tail above the ecliptic. This is encoded here. Luke 9 and 10 encodes this alignment right here. When this alignment occurred then, we had a massive disaster. You see, I realized that it's one of those things which is actually associated with the Black Death, the Great Plague, okay? Because it was massive. 1340s through to, is it half the population of the world died by some estimates, or a third? And we have a precise reference to this, not just to the plague, but we also have a reference to the precise details of the alignment. So here, the work of Victor Klub and Bill Napier, they looked at various ancient chroniclers, and they found a guy who talked about something very interesting happening in 1345, and this is the reference from their book, The Cosmic Winter. One chronicler at least reports of the most immediate cause of the plague in 1345, and it goes on to say that between Cathay and Persia, now Cathay is China, Persia is Iran, that's what those two countries are. Between Cathay and Persia, there rained a vast rain of fire, falling in flakes like snow and burning up mountains and plains and other lands, with men and women. And then arose vast masses of smoke, and whosoever beheld this died within the space of half a day. This is what was witnessed in the sky, because the planets went to certain resonant agitation, cometary's tails were established, and the Earth essentially went through the debris field. And this is what they're seeing. And this polluted the atmosphere. And this is why we had the plagues. So we didn't have any massive geophysical effects at this time, okay? But what we had instead was the plagues themselves, okay? Caused by the toxic atmosphere, because we got caught in a cometary stream. And just to give you a nice diagrammatic representation of it, this then is the very special world age ending alignment. This image is diagrammatically is where you get Mars, Venus, the Sun, and Mercury targeting close to the galactic center, simultaneously the Sun, the Earth, and the Pleiades, okay? And this is a recurring pattern. And I will just show you now, because we mentioned guys like Randall Carlson, Graham Hancock, and they've looked at all the catastrophe, that occurred going back to, 10,000 BC or whatever. Well, let me just show you. I've looked at the geophysical record and all the evidence, and we have this particular configuration occur on an irregular cycle. It occurs with a frequency of 1,183 years, 1,343 years, and also it has another interval of 788 years. And if you work out all the past instances in time when this alignment has occurred, they correspond very accurately with destruction in the geophysical records. So here is a summary listing of it. Here you can see 10,964 BC. That's the whole comet thing everyone talks about, the cometary bombardment, okay? The precise dates you've got here of the starry night when this alignment is at an optimum. 3rd of August, 10,964 BC. You've got from the studies of the Younger Dryas at Göbekli Tepe, they actually gave the date of 10,950 encoded in the calendar stones at Göbekli Tepe. I think it's the vulture stone or something. And this again corresponds to a geophysical record. So the error rate, the difference is only 14 years, okay? You've then got the Younger Dryas end period. Again, this is a date here based upon a series of ice core samples, 9612. Again, it's a precise average of some data on Wikipedia. It's 9612 is the precise date they give. The precise date of this alignment here was the 2nd of August, 9621 BC, only 9 years different. Then we don't seem to have anything in the geophysical record. It's almost like it's mild. So we don't seem to have anything corresponding here on 8438 BC. But then when we go here, 31st of August, 9650 BC, well, we're only 10 years off, 7640 BC. And there's the work of the Tolmans for a cometary bombardment. And I actually have the book somewhere here for a disaster alignment. Can't think where it is at the moment, but I've got the book. It's from, what is it, Uriel's Machine. This is the book here, and the diagram.
They can't see you or me during the entire presentation, though. So just a heads up.
Yeah. Okay. The book is called Uriel's Machine. I'll hold this up later, but they have the work of the Tolmans in this particular presentation. They literally give the date, so radiocarbon dating of 7640 BC, and that's their date. They're only 10 years off when that alignment occurred. We then have massive floods and volcanoes in 6440. The 6440 BC event, that's actually timed most accurately to a massive volcano that exploded. Again, it's only 27 years from another instance of this alignment here in orange, 6467. We appear to have been mild, nothing in the geophysical record necessarily for 5124. We also have what's known as the intense aridization event, 3941 BC. This is when we had a sudden drying spell occur. Expansion of desert somewhere. If you're very sudden, it's like the energy output of the sun changed. Again, one of the effects of these alignments. So that occurred there. Then in 3153 BC, when this pattern occurred, we had a cometary strike. This is per the work of Ioannis, Laritsis, Professor Laritsis, University of Rhodes. He came up with 3150 BC, and there's also a magnetic field blip going off around about the same time. Magnetic field blip also corresponds to the 7640 or 50 BC date. We then have two dates here, 1970 and 627 BC. They appear again not to have any dramatic effects in the geophysical record associated with this alignment. But then we move on to 557 AD. This is what begun the Dark Ages. There's a few disaster alignments that occurred. So this alignment occurred again in 557 AD, and Jesus also encodes it, but that's another presentation. And he also encodes it again, which is the one I've just looked at, 4th of November, 1345 AD, precise day of the optimal alignment. So out of the past 12 times this alignment has occurred, 8 of those times we have had something massive occur, in the geophysical record, either cometary bombardments, caught in a cometary stream, changes in the energy output of the sun, stuff like that. It's been really devastating. So 2 out of 3 times when this has occurred in the past 12 times, we've been devastated. The next time this alignment occurs is in 2528, but we may have some sooner than that even. So let's just move on to the next one. Let me show you another interesting. This is a little citation from a book called The Book of Miracles, which is actually something that was wrote in the 16th century AD. And they give the year 1300, and it states here, this is a quote from the book. In 1300 AD, a terrible comet appeared in the sky, and in this year, on St. Andrew's Day, an earthquake shook the ground so that many buildings collapsed. This is very interesting that they talk about a comet, but they also mention an earthquake occurring. And I like these references because the minute they say an earthquake occurred, we can pinpoint the precise date. So this says it occurred on St. Andrew's Day. We know when St. Andrew's Day is. Wikipedia to the rescue. St. Andrew's Day occurs on the 30th of November, okay? So if we know the year's 1300 AD, and we know 30th of November, okay, well, this particular comet was no ordinary comet, okay? And Jesus knew all about this. Let's have a look, though, at the alignment itself from a top-down view. 30th of November, 1300 AD, wouldn't you just know it? Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, and Ceres, 4-body alignment. Also, the Earth, Mercury, and the Sun are aligned, okay? Separately, contributing conjunction. But if we position ourselves, right, at the center of Jupiter and look all the way down the line of the 4-body alignment, what do we see? Our good buddy, the Pleiades, nicely lined up. It's one of these dangerous directions in the sky. The comet in question is undoubtedly Ceres, and in fact, we're actually looking from Ceres itself, not Jupiter. We're looking at Ceres, so we're seeing Jupiter there, okay? So this is the alignment, right? Ceres would have flared up to develop, I think, a cometary tail, and when they talk about the comet, they're talking about Ceres. Ceres was only officially discovered in 1802, I believe. This is when we actually saw it with a telescope and realized it was an object as part of our solar system. Before that time, we didn't know it was there, but it appears to have been caught up in some of these conjunctions and flared up periodically to develop cometary tails. And so we've seen it, but we've not realized that it's an object in our own solar system. So when it's died back down and become invisible, we didn't know. So we've been thinking Ceres is a different comet every time. It's the same one, but we didn't know this, I think, on multiple occasions. If we just switch to Jupiter and look down the line, this is where you see the sting or the scorpion's pincers here. And these are the planets from the other direction, okay? So this was a bona fide destructive alignment, and Jesus incorporated this into the Bible. And so let me show you how he did it. It's quite ingenious. We're back to the death of John the Baptist. Now we know if we count 770 days from this, and then we count 150 cycles of 3200 days. We target that 4th of November, 1345 AD. Well, here then, what we're going to do is we're going to target the 1300 AD. This is what Jesus did. We just go forwards an extra 360 days. You know, it's as if John the Baptist, instead of dying at 29, he dies at 30, okay, so to speak. So the correction is one more cycle of 360 days. This gets us to the 21st of July, 30 AD. Now we start counting once again cycles of 3200 days. In this case, 145, which is precisely 464,000 days. And if we do that, bang, we target with perfection 30th of November, 1300 AD. That's the day of the earthquake. That's the day of the optimum alignment. So Jesus seems to know about it, okay? And we have another reference, very similar. Let's have a look at the Great Comet of 1556. And again, this is where we still really hadn't got brilliantly with his astronomy. We still weren't using telescopes and in the way we do now. And we hadn't really figured out how orbits worked. And we certainly hadn't discovered Ceres properly. So in 1556 then, there's this great comet appears. And it's usually referred to as the Charles V comet. And it's called that because it says, when the emperor first caught sight of it, he stood aghast and exclaimed, "By this dread sign my fates do summon me." Charles had long meditated about retiring from the world he had conquered and crushed. This is when the Spanish Empire was at its height. And he regarded this comet as a sign from heaven to do so. So he went to this monastery, okay? So this is a great comet then of 1556. Now, it obviously started to build up for several weeks or whatever and was sighted all over the place. But in order for us to do a proper analysis, we need a precise date. We need something special here. We need an earthquake. And so we have one. Here is a nice, interesting reference, because when the comet was seen in the sky, somebody did a woodcut of it. And it says it's a German woodcut depicting an earthquake that occurred 2 hours before dawn on the 10th of March, 1556. And this is in Istanbul in Turkey, a massive earthquake. Very, very notable. So an earthquake and the comet, that's the connection. So let's have a look at the sky then on the 10th of March, top-down view. What have we got here? Saturn, Ceres, and the Sun. Ceres, Mars, and the Earth. Mercury is not quite at an optimum, but here's the interesting thing about this. If you go forwards over the next 3 days, on the 11th, 12th, and 13th, you get a series of alignments that all become optimized, okay? But the 10th of March appears to be the date when we have maximum energetic effect associated with the Earth, because that's when the earthquake occurred, okay? So did Jesus know about this alignment? Yes, he did. Let me show you a very elegant targeting, which for me is utterly decisive. This again is a nice summary from the birth of Jesus up to the death of John the Baptist. And that's how we got there, you know. We got there with the 7,777 days to baptism, minus 8 days, minus the circumcision event. And then we went forwards the 7 times 7 times 7 times 7 days to get to the death of John the Baptist, okay? So that's the final thing that we do after we've done the 8 days back, is that 2401 days to get to the death of John the Baptist. Well, let's remove this. Let's remove that final thing so that we're just here. We've gone back 8 days. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the day. This is the day that you set in motion your calendar system to target the Great Comet of 1556, using cycles of 3200 days. And in this case, you count a precise and very harmonious, very elegant 175 cycles. So you're going to count precisely 560,000 days from the 29th of December here, okay? And if you do that, the day you drop on with absolute perfection is the 10th of March, the day of the earthquake, a flawless targeting. And so this is what you're getting from the Gospels. You are getting Jesus give you multiple future dates that he encodes. I haven't even gone into the ones for the 6th century AD, which started the Dark Ages, but there's multiple alignments like that. And you can see that the parables and all, that there are all these special adjustments are tied into conjunction patterns associated, like, with when Jesus is crucified or when John the Baptist dies, and they all have all these adjustments, and they all target certain dates in his own lifetime, and you set in motion these calendar cycles to target future days of disaster. Now, I have shown you these here, and these are definitely future dates from the perspective of the time of Jesus. You can't fake this, you know what I mean? The Bible is already well established by the 16th century, you know what I mean? So we know he was obviously dealing with the future and seemed to know. He had to have an astronomical model as good as the one we have with Starry Night. He had to know the physics of the solar system. This is why I say this is like high-level, advanced physics knowledge here. You know what I mean? You can't fake this. If somebody can tell you the precise days of alignments, in circa 2,000 years ago, when we're not even supposed to know how to model the solar system correctly. We still think it's a geocentric day. Some people do anyway. We haven't got elliptical orbits. We haven't invented or discovered calculus. We should not be able to know. No one should be able to know the precise dates of future alignments, which don't even involve the Earth. You can't even visually sight them accurately. They involve planets aligned without even the sun, without even the Earth, and you're supposed to know that they accurately occur to the day, over 1,000 years in advance. This is literally impossible knowledge, and yet it's encoded in the Bible, So this is why Jesus, the mastermind behind these stories, was an absolute genius. You can't fake this stuff. So what I decided to do then, I know that we have this definite end of age alignment, the 2528 AD one, 500 years from now. But when I studied all these alignments, and I haven't shown you every one I know, I'll just tell you as a summary, we get these kinds of destructive alignments every few centuries. And the last one I've just shown you is 1556, okay? So I'm thinking to myself, I'm genuinely thinking, I'm saying, I think that we're going to be in a situation where we're pretty much due for one. Right? If we don't get an end of age alignment with some exotic effects going off within the next 50 to 100 years, I personally would be very, very surprised. We only started to get really good in astronomy, around about we're talking like 1800 or so, past 200 years or so ago. And we only officially discovered Ceres then. So we haven't had an end of age alignment, I don't think, since the 1556 event, which again was kind of mild. We had the comet Ceres, I think this was Ceres flaring up to develop cometary properties. We had that go on. We didn't have any massive geophysical event, except we had that earthquake, don't get me wrong. We had something going on, but it wasn't a massive tectonic plate shift and floods going across hundreds of miles inland. It wasn't that level, and we did not get a massive meteor bombardment. So the damage is different every time. We've been kind of lucky. But the 1556 was a bona fide end of age type alignment. So for me, the fact I don't think we've had one since, we're absolutely due for one. So I decided to look at the solar system over the next few decades to see if there's any interesting alignments. And I'm going to show you two, which for me seem to be tied into the Bible. These are speculative, by the way. They're very speculative. They may be absolute nonsense, but there's these two here, and there's one other, but I haven't got it in this presentation. There's one other additional alignment in addition to these two, but these two are two of the best. If somebody said, Keith, gun to your head, if we're going to have an end of age alignment shortly in the upcoming next couple of decades, what are the best alignments that really make me think they could be it? The two I'm going to show you are the two. There's one I'm not going to show you, but I'll leave that from the presentation. So again, I'm looking at a tie-in into the parables of Jesus. So the first alignment I'm going to point to The anchor point, the first anchor point is the baptism day of Jesus, 6th of January 23 AD. Go backwards 96 days, okay? Very interesting. Now, I'll just say a little aside, by the way. Do you know how you know when the second Jewish temple was destroyed? Tisha B'Av, 9th of the month Av, which is 70 AD. Do you know how you do it? You're on the baptism of Jesus. You count forwards 96 days. And then you count 48 cycles of 360 days, and you're right on the day when the temple is destroyed. Jesus knew that too. In this case, we're going backwards 96 days from the baptism of Jesus. This takes us to the 2nd of October 22 AD. Then we start counting our special calendar cycle. We're going to use 3,200 days. That's the unit. Jesus used it a lot. And in this case, we're going to count forwards a very nice 230 cycles of 3,200 days. 736,000 days dead on from this date, the 2nd of October. And if we do that, the day we drop on with absolute perfection is the 5th of November 2037 AD. Now, you might not know this, but the 5th of November in Britain is when we celebrate every year Bonfire Night. Oh, and interestingly enough, it's called Bonfire Night because it was on the 5th of November in 1605 when Guy Fawkes tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament. He was stopped at the last minute, okay? He had the 36 barrels of gunpowder underneath Parliament, and he was caught like just past midnight or whatever, 5th of November, ready to light the fuse. He got ratted out. But if he hadn't have been caught, the House of Parliament here in Britain would have been blown up 1605, 5th of November. And the reason I mention that is because in one of my YouTube videos, I point out that if you go backwards precisely 800,000 days from Bonfire Night, and when I say 800,000, I mean that exactly, not a day more nor a day less, 800,000 days back from the 5th of November 1605, you drop on the day when the first Jewish temple was destroyed, the precise day, 9 Av in the Julian year 586 BC. That's another presentation.
Don't you find it suspicious? I don't want to get you sidetracked that both temples fall on the same day.
Oh yes, this is one of the Jewish traditions that they actually regard it as a really bad, like omen day. 9 Av. It's called Tisha B'Av, and that's when the first temple, Solomon's temple, was destroyed. And also the second temple was destroyed. One's in 586 BC, and the other one is 70 AD. But I found it fascinating that somebody attempted to blow up Parliament precisely 800,000 days after the Jewish temple was destroyed. I found that fascinating. But this particular disaster alignment, then I'm drawing your attention to, it happens to occur in 2037 on the 5th of November. So let's have a look at the solar system from a top-down view on this precise date. And this is what we get. We have a direct four-body alignment of Mars, Earth, Mercury, and Ceres, whilst simultaneously an extra contributing conjunction of Jupiter, the Sun, and Mercury. Now, reason why this is so significant, let's have a look down the line of this four-body alignment. It's aligned with the Pleiades. I'm in the center of Ceres, Mercury, Earth, Mars, just like, I think it's at 1.5 degrees off the Pleiades. And so it's rare, a four-body alignment like this with a contributing conjunction involving Jupiter and this elegant tie-in to the Gospels makes me think this is a contender. It's speculative, but it's an interesting contender. Makes me think on this day, could Ceres flare up to develop cometary properties? Could the planet start shaking? Could we see the sun change color? Do you know what I mean? It's a contender. It's an interesting one. The other shot is from Mars itself. Again, if we position ourselves down the line, you get Ceres, the Earth, and Mercury. There you go. They line up very nicely, almost equidistant from this viewpoint, the pincers of the Scorpion. Okay. Now let's look at the next one. This one here then, this actually is jumping from the 4th of November 1345 AD. So this one here then is not directly from the stories in the Bible. The stories in the Bible get you to this date, 4th of November. This is the Revelation 12 one. So if we're here, we can actually target another day which is close at hand, another contender for disaster. In this case, you know 6 times 6 times 6 is 216 days. Well, if we go backwards 216 days, okay, from the 4th of November, there's the Julian day number. We're then going to start counting 80 cycles, a very nice, elegant number, 80 times 3,200 days, which is 256,000 days dead on. And if we do that, we drop on the 6th of March, 2046 AD. And this is when we have another interesting alignment. So let's have a look from a top-down viewpoint. There's the alignment. It's two alignments offset from one another. Jupiter, Sun, Mercury, Ceres, and Jupiter, Venus, and Mars. Now, why is this so significant? Well, firstly, let me just have a look from the center of Jupiter all the way down the line, just so you can see how accurate this is. There's Venus and Mars right near the head start of Virgo, interestingly enough. And then we've got Ceres and Mercury there. Ceres is well above the Sun because of its ecliptic, the way its orbit is, but they're very much aligned top down. It's longitudinal crossings that matter. And then we've got the Earth here, okay, separately. So let's just have a look again. Let's have a comparison. This alignment here versus the 687 BC destructive alignment. And there you can see the comparison. We know this was a disaster alignment here, and it's Jupiter, Venus, and Mars. And then for the one in 2046, we've got Jupiter, Venus, and Mars. And then it's Jupiter, Sun, Ceres, and then Jupiter, Sun, Ceres. Mercury is also present in this one, 6th of March, which just leads me on to compare the 2046 one to Crucifixion Day, which is, remember when Mercury was a part of it, but the order was switched? Jupiter, Ceres, Sun, Mercury. Well, it's Jupiter, Sun, and Mercury's to the side, just like that one, but Ceres is over here, with the 33 AD one. But again, you can see that subtle similarity. So if we get the same kinds of alignments, it makes you think maybe it's a contender.
I was going to say, do you think something's going to happen in 2046? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, this is what I'm saying. What I'm showing you here are two possible alignments, which they've got tie-ins to this kind of mathematical system, which is related to the parables of Jesus, enough to hint that, hey, maybe they're there. But they also have the same kinds of patterns as prior alignments that we know have caused disaster, okay? And so, 4-body alignments with contributing conjunctions lined to the Pleiades, or an alignment here, which is, again, is like a twin alignment involving Jupiter. There's a few more I could show you regarding Jupiter, which, that I think there was 1896 BC. This was to do with the invasion of Ireland and another disaster. That involved Jupiter, Venus, and Mars, and Jupiter, Mercury, and Ceres as well. So there's this Jupiter being aligned with two separate alignments offset from one another. The certain alignments like that have occurred in the past. That is one of the most significant types of patterns. But again, you're trying to just judge which ones are the special ones and which ones are, a bit too commonplace. But as I said, these are speculative possibilities. There's another one that occurs in 2041 AD, but I ain't got the slides as part of this presentation. But let me just show you now something about geopolitics to do with the Bible, the final bit. And this is to do with the feeding of the 4,000, another very interesting parable. So the feeding of the 4,000 then, let's have a look at the Bible reference. This is from Matthew. And again, you're looking at the numbers in the story. So Jesus is with his disciples, and there's a great big massive crowd with him. And he's been with them for 3 days, and everybody's hungry. And so Jesus says, how many loaves do you have? 7, they replied, and a few small fish. So he told the crowd to sit down, and he took these 7 loaves and the fish, and he gave thanks, broke them, gave them to his disciples, and then turned to the people. It's as if it's some kind of magical bag, and he keeps pulling out, extra bread and fish and whatever. But anyway, after the disciples picked up 7 full baskets of broken pieces that were left over. So they kind of start out with 7 loaves, and then they've got 7 baskets left over, right? And Jesus is with these guys for 3 days, and there's 4,000 of them. So the answer, the solution is, you've got to ask yourself, these all represent days, by the way, all these numbers. What is the mapping in time of this parable? And what is it all about? Well, let's have a look at the next slide here. This again is a summary, and what I'm just going to show you again is, when we're at the birth of Jesus, and I say you go forward 7,777 days to get to the baptism. But I've also said to you, we've had various corrections which are multiples of 6. 6 times 6 times 6 is 216, okay? Well, it's kind of interesting that if you keep multiplying 6 by itself quite a few times, 5 times, you get the following. And here's a little table for you to consider. 6 times 6 times 6 times 6 times 6. Bottom line here, 7,776, okay? Now, you will notice here that it's 7,777 days, okay, to get to the baptism of Jesus. And we needed the 4 sevens because we're going to multiply 4 sevens together to get that John the Baptist connection. But it is also important to note that the day before baptism is also significant in terms of multiples of 6. So that day before baptism is 7776 days after the birth of Jesus. So if we go here then and just look at that, so we're on the 6th of January, he's baptized on the, we're on the 5th of January, Jesus is baptized on the 6th, so we're 1 day before. We are this number of days here, 7776 days after the birth of Jesus, okay? So if we're here then, let's have another interesting backward correction involving the number 7. In this case, we're going to go back 777 days. We love the number 7. We do. And if we do, as you can see, we get to the 19th of November, and lo and behold, we have a lunar eclipse. What are the odds of a blood moon? Wow. Remember that story I was telling you about the woman who's 12 years, she's been ill for 12 years with issues of the blood. And this is an interesting point because if you look in the King James Bible, it does literally say issues of the blood. If you look in the New Revised Standard Edition, it just says hemorrhages. And I must admit, hemorrhages loses something in translation. When you think hemorrhages, you're thinking too modern and scientific. But when you see issues of the blood, the minute you see the word blood, you think blood, red, blood moon, lunar eclipse. So I like the King James reference in that one because you are targeting a lunar eclipse. And the lunar eclipse here is also the anchor point of the feeding of the 4,000. Let's just show you here. Firstly, the optimum lunar eclipse, okay? If we just adjust it from 12 noon, we basically go to 6 hours 40 minutes. So we've gone back 5 hours 20 minutes, but we're still on the 19th of November. So this is the optimum alignment for the full moon, okay? The blood moon type thing. And you can see it here in Starry Night. We're at the center of the earth, and there is the blood moon. And how interesting, it's between the pincers, or the horns, should say, of Taurus, okay? Because this is actually lined up to the galactic center area. If we were to go to the center of the moon and look, we're going to be looking at the galactic center, between the sting of the scorpion area. But before we do that then, let's just have a top-down view of the solar system on this lunar eclipse day. Wouldn't you just know it? We've got some very special alignments going off. We've got the Earth, the Sun, and Mars lined up. And we've got the Earth, Mercury, and Ceres lined up. Very interesting alignments. But let's just have a look from the moon itself towards the galactic center. This is what I say, the direction of the eclipse is significant. The sun, I've labeled it, but you can't see it because it's behind the Earth here. And the Earth here and the sun, where are they? Right next to the foot of a fucus, between sting of the scorpion's tail, Shola, and also Z Serpentis. How interesting, okay? Very interesting. So, let's just look at the mathematics now. This here then, we're the lunar eclipse here, and we're in the 19th of November, 20 AD, okay? This is lunar eclipse then, which is 777 days prior to the day before the baptism of Jesus, right? The date that we're just looking at. So, if you are on this date and you start a 3200 day calendar system going, right? And you count 220 cycles of 3200 days. The total number of days you'll be counting is 704,000 days. Now, remember this parable's called Feeding of the 4,000? The 4,000 are the first 4,000 of the 704,000, right? So 3 days prior to this date is the 3 days that Jesus is with the people. And 4,000 days are the first 4,000 days, the 4,000 people, the first 4,000 days of this total here, which is what you get when you multiply 220 by 3,200 days. Now, there are certain references in the Bible to the number of temple servants in the Old Testament, and there are precisely 220 temple servants, okay? I think that's in the book of Ezra, but don't quote me on that. If you actually do go forwards then, 704,000 days from the 19th of November, this precise lunar eclipse, okay, you actually target a date which is very much in our own time, okay? It's got immense geopolitical significance. The date in question is the 14th of May, 1948. This is when the state of Israel was re-established right on this day, okay? Jesus appears to have known this. It's incorporated into this passage here, the feeding of the 4,000, because if you were to count the 4,000 people, you'd have exactly 700,000 days. Very harmonious, everybody likes the number 7. It'd be 700,000 days to count the state of Israel being re-established, okay? But let's just go further. If we do just go the first 4,000 days, we get to the 2nd of November, 31 AD. So, this is the completion of it, right? You know how we had 7 loaves of bread and there were 7 baskets left over? 7 times 7 is 49. We add those on the end. Baskets left over, 7 times 7, and add it on the end. We then go to the 21st of December, okay? 21st of December, right? If we go forwards 49 extra days after the 4,000, and we have a special alignment. Let's have a look at it from the top down. This is it. We have a Jupiter, Venus, Mars alignment, and also a Ceres, Sun, Venus alignment of sets. It's very interesting. Again, it's the kind of alignment that makes me say, yes, that's correctly how to understand. That's how to correctly understand the parable. It's you go, from the 777 days backwards, you're the beginning of the 4,000, and then it's 49 days there. And then you can see how we've got all these special alignments targeting dates of great significance. So here's how we get to another interesting date towards a special lunar eclipse, okay? A very interesting date. Do you believe in destiny? Yeah, do you believe in destiny?
I don't know. I honestly I'm agnostic. However, I do think these celestial bodies lining up can be predictable and can influence us. I'm not going to act a fool and say, well, if the ocean tide is controlled by the moon, to act as if some celestial bodies don't have influence on us, to me, is, obviously.
Well, what I'm getting at basically is about people being born on special days. So, do you believe Donald Trump is a man of destiny?
I don't know.
Well, let me show you something very interesting about Donald Trump. This is his Wikipedia page, right? And you can see it's locked because obviously everybody be trying to update it, every second, So we can be confident because it's locked. We've got his date of birth dead on, okay? June the 14th, 1946. This is just before the State of Israel. It's just shortly before the State of Israel was established, which was in 1948. Now, we all know that Donald Trump seems to be a big fan of Israel, okay? So here's an interesting thing about Donald Trump and his birthday on the 14th of June. This is modern day Israel then, 14th of May, 1948, okay? So, if we want to target the birthday of Donald Trump, how many days do we go back? And the correct answer is 700, exactly. 700. Ooh, very interesting. But there's more. There's something very special happening on Donald Trump's birthday. A lunar eclipse, a blood moon. And look at where it is located. We're at the center of the Earth, looking at the optimum, and it's right next to the foot of Ophiuchus, right there, galactic center alignment, okay? Right on his birthday. And it's 700 days prior to when the State of Israel was reestablished. Very, very interesting. I mean, in the Bible, we went backwards 777 days from one day before Jesus is baptized, and that's when we dropped upon the lunar eclipse there, okay, on the 19th of November. And that lunar eclipse was also targeting the same area of the sky. It's just that the Earth and the moon are reversed. So we're at the center of the Earth here. So we have to look to the moon, and we find the moon blood red next to the foot of Ophiuchus. If we just have a look back at the other one, we have to be at the center of the moon and look to the Earth. And if we do that, that's when we see the Earth next to the foot of Ophiuchus. This is on 19th November 20 AD. So it's the same direction in the sky, and he's got that 700-day backward motion from this day, which seems to be targeted by Jesus for when Israel's reestablished. And so it makes Donald Trump's birthday, the man himself, really, really significant. This, I'll tell you, it's fascinating stuff.
See, this is. I'll give you an example. And look, this is fascinating. I really do think this is cool. I'm skeptical because we're factoring in one guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Does this work for Obama? Oh, yeah. Does this work for Bush? Does this work for Hillary? Does this work? And I mean, it's awesome if you do zero in on what makes sense. But when you look at more, you're like, but what I do like about this is I could see how celestial bodies, and they're lining up, and the alignment of this universe we live in influences us. And maybe when you say destiny, as someone who's more of a naturalist, so to speak, this still can apply. I mean, look, you don't have to think there's a guy floating in the clouds somewhere looking down at you to believe that stars and have influence on humans. I mean, in the way that we are and how we act in my opinion, as how we act as an advanced animal. I mean, in my opinion, I think that we are, personally, I know that everybody has their own little thing, but I personally do think we did evolve, but we're a higher species. And regardless, we're influenced by outside, things. And I think that the stars and such may have their influence on us. And I don't necessarily agree with Carl Sagan when he says that the celestial bodies don't really have influence and that we absolutely have our own destiny in our hands, because I'm not even certain we have absolute free will, so there's a lot here that we're influenced by other sources that I think play a role. But fascinating stuff though so far. I mean, this is great because you can see technically if we learn this, we can also predict. Technically, if we learned how to do this, we could predict the future in that aspect if these cycles are predictable.
Yeah, I do think that this is what I'm saying. I think that it is possible to know something about the future in special ways. And in the Bible, Jesus appears to encode destructive alignments from a basic physics point of view, I mean, you could actually say that a person scientifically, if they knew which planetary configurations can cause disruptions and they had an accurate model of the solar system, they could make those forecasts in a scientific way, and you wouldn't consider them prophecy, to be honest. It'd be like a scientific thing. But then when you start getting into the realm of geopolitical events, like knowing when a certain declaration in the UN, a body that doesn't even exist 2,000 years ago, is going to be made, and when people are going to recognize a state being created, that's when things start to get a bit strange. And I admit that there's things like this, but I don't want you to think that it's just the Bible. I talk about the Jewish temples. They appear to have been destroyed, and again, that's a geopolitical event. If you've got a critical day when a temple goes up in flames, and you can also show that that's tied into these calendar cycles, you think, wow, and I could show you the presentation on that as well, because I've got that all nailed. But this is why I say, when I talked about the Houses of Parliament and somebody attempting to blow them up, and it turned out to be an 800,000 day gap from when somebody actually blew up, when the Babylon conquered Judah, the Israelites, and destroyed the temple in 586 BC. So there are some incredible connections, but I admit they all seem so isolated. They seem so isolated, and you do wonder, because like with the people on Earth, there's like 7 billion people, and so for me to just say this is true for Donald Trump, I know you could probably say, well, it could be true for like how many other hundreds of people or whatever, thousands of people, you know what I mean? So I get the point.
And he is a world stage figure, so he's socially a very important figure. So in my opinion, I've seen this a lot, and not just like with this particular thing, but like there are Christians who, what they've done, and this is just my opinion, okay? They look at the text and they say, "Oh, the prediction of the end of times," or here's evidence from prophecy in the New Testament that Donald Trump would come, and then this, that, and so the way I personally, because I'm outside of fundamentalism, I don't buy into some of their narratives, what they do, but the closest I could get to prophecy, for example, is being able to track. So technically, this is predictable with the right knowledge. It's predictable not only in the celestial bodies, but if you see, let's just suppose like you've talked about this entire lecture, and I took notes and I said, you know what, you've talked about the 2 temples that went down on a certain day because of certain bodies. Well, those bodies will repeat those actions in the future. And I suspect that day another political, political situation is going to occur, because somehow we humans are influenced by the celestial bodies the same way the moon affects the tide on this earth, in some social way as a species, that I can practically predict that we're going to lose our mind at one point and lose our emotional control and do something that's going to be catastrophic to our own people, like 9/11 or something that you just never know what it might be. But that is where I could say, hey, I even spoke to Randall Carlson a while back. I said, Randall, because we were talking about the great year, and the great year being this 24 to 26,000 year span. And I said, is the cycles of the earth going through ice ages? I said, can we predict, have you done enough research possibly to predict when another ice age can come based on the great year and some of these astrological, examples? And he says, well, I'm working on it. I would love to be able to determine how the earth is going to possibly, and when we might end up having another, intense, like crazy earth-like change where we end up back in an ice age or a super hot situation. I don't know. You know what I mean? So I'm open to these scientific parts. But getting into like, I can predict the future based on me having a supposed special revelation just to me, to God. I think there's science behind it if you're going to predict something. I don't buy into the whole spiritual idea.
That's the kind of stuff I try and avoid myself. I mean, I look for solutions like the ones I'm presenting here. And I'm not going to tell you I'm a fundamental Christian. I am certainly not. I'm a complete heretic. I mean, I go into all kinds of esoteric stuff. I'm into Greek mythology. And I do think that all of these different cultures, they're encoding the same astronomical patterns, by using like their own localized bespoke gods and heroes. So it's the same esoteric knowledge. and they're trying to say the same sorts of things. I'm not even going to tell you I'm that intimately familiar with Christian doctrine at all. I'm not. I just look at the Gospels. I'm trying to figure it out as mysteries. For me, Christianity essentially is a mystery religion. And when people get into controversy about, well, it was Paul that kind of spread it all, I'm not really interested in Paul. I've not even read hardly any of Paul, so I don't care about Paul. No offense, Paul. But the only books in the New Testament that I really focused on are the Gospels and Revelation. I'm not really that interested in the others. There's a lot of stuff in the Old Testament as well that I think is kind of, it's off topic. You've got somebody who has taken a bunch of books, and I do think that they've been edited carefully and maintained over time, and people have embedded, they've basically embellished history. So we can say, for example, yeah, there's a real Exodus event, a real event, the real flood event. But then when you start talking about the flood event and Noah's Ark, and it gives you just a basically rectangular box type object with 3 dimensions, well, we don't know what the ark is. But what I do know is you're supposed to multiply those 3 numbers together. You get I think it's 480, no, is it 450,000 days. And you're supposed to go forwards in time from a certain day associated with the date of the ark, the disaster alignment, and you target another alignment. I've got that all in other work. So I know what they're trying to do. They're basically embellishing history like Sennacherib's army. Yes, real army, real siege, no problem. But 185,000 men, an embellished figure, because it's trying to tell you that's the interval of time between the destruction of that, which is associated with an alignment there, and another alignment just at the close of the 1200 BC, I think it's 1193. So this is the kind of stuff that you've got going on in the Bible. You've got a kind of a core history, but you've then got people embedding numbers in the stories, which are all to do with calendar corrections that do encode the dates of significance for geophysical events to do with astronomical events in the solar system, which can cause us destruction, and also geopolitical events that we kind of would classify as prophecy. See, if somebody says, I'm prophesying an event politically will occur, you think you can't, you don't necessarily think you can figure that out from the planets as such. But you do think, yeah, physically we should be able to work out the science of resonant harmony with respect to the solar system, and we should be able to figure out these disasters in a kind of pure scientific way, in terms of the physical side of disruption to the solar system. But it's like the same kinds of things can be tied into political events, and that's where we start to say, hey, the guy that knows this somehow knows the future. They know something very advanced.
Well, I've heard it said that back in the ancient world, the stargazer, if you will, the magi, so to speak, just to give an example, who knew the stars, which usually were priests. This was people that they saw as obviously able to predict prophecy, etc. The gods would tell them, or God would tell them. And the common folk would come to them knowing these guys knew something they didn't, and they thought, wow, they're really having this direct, this unique relationship with the one true or our God. And I think that these guys knew some science and math and had predictable outcomes. And some of them obviously became false prophets because some things didn't happen and they must have not had math right or whatever. But I wonder if that's where this is going. And one of the things I'd like to see, and not like what we hear all the time with people, we've heard, for example, I'm sure you've talked about Nostradamus. If you're into esotericism stuff and things, you probably do discuss it, but I would be very interested in seeing someone today. Right. I would be very interested in seeing someone today, like flat out, not like we hear with the Christians today who are, the end of the world has to happen because Jesus says, well, first of all, I don't think it ever was talking about the end of the actual world. I think this is just cycles and ages, etc.
Oh, yes. I agree with that.
But I'd like to see someone on like a big stage come in and say, listen, and not all crazy hocus pocus, John the Baptist eating honey and locusts. Okay, just a guy who's scientific, maybe modern thinking. He says, listen, there is a calculation. There is an actual science to this that encompasses everything as us as a species to everything we know. And I can predict that on this day, there is going to be a political catastrophe, not in a funny, like hocus pocus way, because of the way that we are connected to the world we live in, and everything from the harmony of this earth to the other. We're one with this earth. We can't leave the environment we're in. And we are influenced and affected from everything from the magnetism to, if the earth is having a heartbeat, so are we. And I honestly believe that it goes through phases. And when it goes through phases, we inevitably go through phases. And that is where I think someone's going to come along, and if they can tap into this and see something here, if it's there, I say that for those who are skeptics, to predict something, and it happens.
What you've just said there, it strongly makes me think of a certain thread of research I've gone down. And there's a lot of stuff I've not shown you. But do you know how I mentioned... and I think we're all familiar, occultists and whatever, when they want to do their ceremonies, they want to do it on a special time when the planets are in a certain, because they think that they will be able to achieve their ends if they do things at certain times. Well, people seem to pick, wittingly or unwittingly, days to do things, to engage in actions, and they basically commit themselves to engaging in an action which may or may not be successful. And this is why I said to you, the connection between the destruction of the Jewish temple, the first one, I think was it Nebuchadnezzar, 586 BC. They came in. The guy destroyed the temple. He did it when he did it, under the Hebrew calendar, on 9 Av, in Tisha B'Av, 586 Julian, right? He did that. 800,000 days, dead on later, 5th of November, 1605, Guy Fawkes is there, tinderbox, 36 barrels of gunpowder underneath Parliament, ready to set the whole thing. That's the day he picked. He was caught red-handed. The event never blew up Parliament, but the day was picked. In the United States, Robert Kennedy was assassinated, and he died. And I think, was it the 6th of June? It was 1968. I think it was the 6th of June. I did a presentation on this on my YouTube channel. So I looked at this, okay? If you're on the precise day when Robert Kennedy dies, he doesn't die straight away when he's shot. I think it's about 24 hours later or something. But he dies, I think it's on the 6th of June. You're on that precise date. Start counting 360-day years. Count 13 cycles of 360 days, which is 4,680 days, I believe. What day do you drop on with absolute perfection? The very day somebody attempts to assassinate Ronald Reagan. Do you remember that? I think it's 1980 or 81 or whatever. It's the very day, that Hinckley guy, the guy that comes out of nowhere and fires 7 shots out of a 6-shot revolver. That guy. yeah, we 7 shots. But anyway, there's talk about another bullet being fired. But Reagan, he was hit, and it was really touch and go, but he survived. But the attempt was made. And you see how Robert Kennedy attempt was, and it was successful. I don't think that Sirhan did it, but well, unless it were under mind control. But the bottom line is the attempt was made to assassinate the presidential candidate there, Robert Kennedy. The attempt was made against Reagan. They're tied together mathematically by these calendar cycles. One is successful, the other is not. And this is why when it comes to like forecasting precise things, sometimes you can only forecast the date when something big is going to be attempted. You can't necessarily know the outcome. It could flip a switch. It goes one way or another. Do you know what I mean?
It's very funny you say this, because I just did an interview with someone, and he's into the Mayans, okay, big time. Like, I'm talking, he understands the 20-day cycle and 36 decans. I don't know this stuff that well. We just went through one episode where he was explaining, and he's like, listen, he said, the Mayans, and they've taught him, he's like, you could literally go into a coma for 50 years, wake up and not have to observe the heavens, all right, knowing what they teach you about animals, about people, and the social structure around us. And you can tell what day you are in the calendar based on what is going on in the environment with people, animals, etc. He said that social influence has been something that they've been able to predict and base it off of their time and their calendar. Now, I would love to link you up with him sometime to discuss these matters, because if you can predict the actions of people by behaviors as a species based on, this tells me we're connected more to everything around us than what we necessarily be told. So technically, how free can you really be in terms
This
of
is it, yeah.
Yeah, you know?
I think, was it in the Corpus Hermetica, they talk about us being trapped within the cosmic framework, but somehow a master of it. You know, it influences us, but we have the power to break free or, you know, act, you know, in some way sovereign over the influences of the celestial powers. You know, it's something like that. So I think this is the kind of the mystery of sovereignty for people. And the very word sovereign means above the law. If you are above the law, you create it and you set it in motion. You just got to wonder if the laws of certain celestial powers and certain energies are present, but we have something within us we can command, which is of a higher power. We can override lower laws, lower influences, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, you asked me an important question. Do I believe in destiny? People ask me all the time, do you believe in God? They ask me this, okay? And I cannot answer them saying yes based on already knowing what they mean when they say, yes. Do you believe in God?
You see, when I said to you, do you believe in destiny? I don't want you to misunderstand me. I did not mean that to be synonymous with, do you believe in God? And
or something, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So technically, I'm very, even though I'm not certain, right? I'm not educated enough to know these things, not on the level you do with the mathematics here and understanding times and such. And whether I'm skeptical of some of the timings that you've discussed, even though they're plausible explanations, you're trying to make sense of something. I'm only skeptical because I've not it's not something I've chewed on. It's not beef jerky that I've chewed on for a while. So it takes me time to digest ideas, because I used to just hook, line, and sinker, believe everything. And now I'm very cautious, but I investigate, and you've opened a door for me to consider more knowledge on this. Plus, I'm going to be having Randall Carlson on the show here not too long from now. So there's going to be more catastrophe and influences like this being discussed. When you asked me, do I believe in destiny? I can't help as a human but to look within myself sometimes and feel there is something bigger drawing me in directions and making me feel influenced, whether it's my own consciousness, whether it's my, whatever you'd like to call it. I don't care for definitions. Do I think that I'm here for a purpose, for a reason? Yes. If that's what you mean by destiny, do I think there's ways of predicting things to come? Yes. I'm not going to guess that I know for sure why. All I can do is the next right thing, help the next person, be the best person that can be. So I appreciate the question too, because I don't know, but with that being said, I think we're getting close to the end, are we not?
Yeah. As I said, with regards to say Randall Carlson's work, the thing about it is, I understand what you're saying about precession, okay, and I have a chapter on precession in my book, where I talk about the binary theory of precession, which I believe is correct. And I actually show these some of the cycles associated with it. But here's the thing about a lot of researchers that talk about precession, okay? They talk about it as just the cycle itself of the sun, rising through different zodiacal star systems over 25,770 years. They view it seemingly as an abstraction. What I want to reinforce here with the alignments that I've been showing here is, when I talk about alignments, and I say, hey, they're in certain special directions in the sky, like with the Pleiades, like with the galactic center stars, because these are very far away background stars, the alignments take into account precession. So you're not just looking at precession as an abstract cycle of 25,000 years. You have got to isolate the very precise conjunction patterns which line up with certain precise directions in the sky with certain constellations. And you've got to look at the cycles of those alignments. And this is why the core mystery pattern I was showing you with the galactic alignment of Mars, Venus, Sun, Mercury, and Sun, Earth, Pleiades one, that one there. When I'm showing you this, I'm saying, look, this occurs, on a certain cycle, a gap of 1183 years, 1343 years, another 1183 years, and then 788 years. So it keeps on repeating that exact pattern. And obviously, that is going to be a part of precession. It's going to be a part of it. But the precession itself as the cycle of 25,000 years, the completion of one precessional cycle, just ticking that over, it doesn't mean anything in and of itself as such. It's all about the conjunctions that take place with background stars, which you're obviously having to take precession into account with, if that makes sense.
So technically, you got a whole pie. The whole pie could be the whole great year. Yeah. Whoop-de-doo. What makes up the pie, though, are the slices and the ingredients, and the ingredients is what you're discussing here, and why that's vital. You get the great year when you look at what the ingredients are, and something that I think is important you mentioned in here, and I think this does tie into the big pie picture of the great year, is the ages. These ages are very significant on what I think there are 12 months in this great year, so to speak, and there are ingredients to this thing that these ages that Jesus is saying, the end of the age is right here. This generation is ending this age, and they're moving from one zodiacal sign processionally into another one, I suspect. So
it's a very complex system, and this is why I know people talk about ages like of yugas, and they somehow split up. It's like with a precessional cycle, they split it up into 12 parts or whatever, and they talk about them like that. That for me is so basic. It's almost irrelevant, because, as I said, we have a complex series of end-of-age alignments of different types. There's only one pattern that I've identified as being a recurring pattern, which is that special alignment that I've mentioned. That is the template, and it's the instances of that alignment that are the core or the key anchor point dates to set in motion calendar systems to target variant destructive alignments that occur in between it. And I've never found one other configuration of an exact same type, which I can say, I've got the cycle of that second pattern nailed as well. I know precisely. I've only got one cycle nailed on exactly that I know occurs, with a certain pattern to it. The other conjunctions I mentioned here, they're all uniquely separate and distinct. I don't know when they occur again, if you know what I'm saying. And so this is why the pattern for me is so much more complicated. And the explanations I've seen, other people give with talk about precessional cycles, they're so basic that for me, they've not really cracked the mystery at all. They're dealing with something that's just too abstract. It's not about just saying one precessional cycle is 25,700 years. Let's split it up into half or a quarter, or, it's not that. You've just got to look at the individual unique conjunction patterns which occur lined up to the stars, as they do in a complex pattern. And precession is taken into account because you take into account background stars, but the system has necessarily no basic.
That's why why you're right, because it strips away predictability too when they go that basic. So one of the things I think is interesting you bring up, and this is why I asked Mr. Carlson, is can we predict another ice age? And I think it'd be interesting to know if we could, but you can't if you're sitting here talking.
The answer is this is the thing about ice ages. Remember when I talked about one of those alignments in it was a 3900 BC event. the intense aridization event. This is what geologists have figured. What they basically say is, for some reason, everything got really hot on the Earth. It was a sustained, intense heat. Deserts expanded, and this effect lasted for several centuries. Now, I would say that the effect was abruptly triggered by the alignment pattern that I noted, which caused a sudden but fundamental change in the energy output of the sun. We then have to wait for another alignment to occur, which causes another kind of sudden change in the sun so that it drops. And so when you think about things like ice ages, I would be saying something similar. We need to know, they'll usually, unless we're talking about these Milankovitch cycles, which is all to do with subtle changes in the elliptical orbits, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about conjunction patterns, okay? And when we're talking about these kind of world age esoteric cycles, they may be abruptly triggered and then last for several centuries, say, maybe a few thousand years. And then another type of alignment will occur, which will change the energy output of the sun, say, and then something else will change. So an ice age, if it's in terms of forecasting one, could, if you knew the precise configurations which would trigger it, cause a decrease in energy output of the sun, and you knew that this was going to last for several centuries until it was modified again, you know, you could forecast them if you had that level of precise physical knowledge. You know what I mean? That's the kind of thing we're after. But that's way beyond, I think, what Carlson is looking at, because I think he's looking at these gradual cycles from what I gather. I don't think he's looking at conjunctions triggering sudden events like that. I think that he's not going in that direction.
That's a good question. I'm not certain if he's taking the same approach like you are. I know that he does talk about how he thinks an asteroid, obviously, or some type of comet or something struck us at some point to, 12,000, 900 years ago. But I know Robert Schoch, he believes that there were pulses from the sun. It had obviously, given off solar flares that caused an extreme amount of heat to the Earth, which put us into a melting of the ice age and 400 feet rise to the oceans. And like I said, all these things are outer influences, and we get so caught up in our world to think that there is no influence from the outer,
This is why people, even Victor Klub and Bill Napier have looked at that. When you look to the work of the Tolmans, and they talked about a meteor strike of certain fragments hitting us in 7,640 BC. And then we had the work of an asteroid impact, hitting the Mediterranean, 3150 BC. Got the physical evidence for those things. But here's the critical thing. It was exactly the same alignment pattern present, which was responsible. But how it was responsible was by this manner. You're talking about the planets like Venus and Mercury developing cometary properties, igniting, spewing off material, massive long trains, and also blasting off. Even with energetic effects like electric universe type stuff, you can blast material off, hot spots that form. So what we had was what the material that hit us, it wasn't like just a fragment that came in from deep space, from orbiting the Earth, orbiting the sun for millennia and just happened to hit us. No. It was newly blasted off of one of the planets when they developed these cometary properties. And so it's the planets themselves put into resonant agitation are what's responsible when they blast off material and we get some of these significant fragments which hit us. That's what caused these meteor bombardments, like in 10,964 BC. That's what caused it. But at the same time, sometimes we might get just caught in a cometary stream of more small particles, like in 1345 AD. We didn't have a massive bombardment of material. And then, like you've just said there, one of the things that people talk about is the sun itself. When we talk about energetic changes and it being sudden, that could again be like a spherical shell of energy, flaring off the sun, again triggered by certain alignments. And so it's almost like one of these weird, I think some people it's called a micronova, but it's an energetic type impulse. And that also might bombard the Earth and cause this like light show in the sky, which also might be quite toxic as well. So there's things like that. And I do think that these effects will, they can also modify the energetic state of the planet that affect the broad mood of all of humanity. And they are what's responsible for changing like the emotional state of people, the intellectual state of humanity. Again, it's bursts of energy, all triggered by conjunctions. These are the most subtle effects. I mean, I've just looked at some of the crude destructive effects, but there's elements of how it affects personality and geopolitics, which is like way above my pay grade,
Right.
In terms
this is,
you know what I mean?
But I like the way you phrased it. And I think we're on the same page, brother. I really do. I figure let's wrap this one up because we can do more of these. And how do they get a hold of you?
My book is Occult Physics, and my website is also occultphysics.com. So if you're interested in my book, you can get it there. That's my website, occultphysics.com, basically.
I'll put it down in the description. You guys can click the link.
Yeah. And there's essays on my website, and they also, in the tab of my videos, I've kind of compiled a bit of a list of some of the videos I've done from my YouTube channel. They're all accessible in order via my website, where I show some of these slides, but not as advanced as I think some of this stuff. I've got quite a lot of slideshow presentations, and they deal in many areas. There's many great mysteries to do with, like, the Sumerian king lists and the Barossus. I've totally cracked that one. I'll tell you.
Snap! We might have to have that one on the show because I'm into that.
Yes, I have cracked that one. I was like proud of that. That was just several months ago. Sometimes I do the slideshows, and then I might delay ages before I actually do them for my YouTube channel because it takes a long time editing them. But
well, let's do. If you get your slideshow and you're good, we'll do a show. We'll do another one on that. I really appreciate you joining me here, and this was fun. It was a change up from just the historicity talks of mythology and a variety of different things. I really appreciate it, brother. So I hope to see you come back on here again.
Okay, then.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. And don't forget, we are Myth Vision.